Hi, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstead, sitting down, of course, with Keith Myers here as usual to talk about Seahawks football. Today's a special show. We've got Dan Viens of the Seahawks Forever Podcast as our guest, longtime friend of the show. Welcome in. Dan, how you doing?
Doing good. This is a special show. It's so special that I'm wearing my glasses for it.
Me too. Me too. Keith, how you doing, man? Welcome in.
I'm doing good, and I'm thirsty. So let's jump into the beer portion of the show.
Yeah.
You want to explain the format here? What are we doing?
Yeah, exactly. So this is our 8th annual question and answer show. We've been doing this for a while. So every year we kind of set football aside a little bit. We've got both football related questions and non-football related questions going on today. And everyone's brought a few things in and also some viewer questions as well. And so it's just a fun show where we just kind of let it all go. We don't bring a lot of notes in to make sure we cover all the topics that we want to talk about during the day. And we just kind of freelance this thing, which is fun. And especially having Dan here. We've never had a guest for the show. It's always Keith and I. We always end up asking the same question. So in year 4, we've asked the same questions that we had asked in year 7. So it's nice to have a little fresh perspective today. We appreciate that from you, Dan.
It'll be fun. It'll be nice to talk about some non-football stuff too, if that should arise.
Yeah. Well,
anything goes except we decided on one thing, right?
Yeah. No politics today.
No politics.
No politics.
Thank you. Thank goodness. Right. Okay. So we have decided we are all very thirsty, and part of this show is to share some of our favorite beers in a beer tasting format. So I'll start. I've brought my first beer in is from Fate Brewing here, just located down the street from me in Phoenix, Arizona. And I'm going to start on the light end of things. And I brought in a what they call halfway to Heffen, which is a Hefeweizen from them. And I thought that would be a safe introduction to afternoon drinking today. So how about you, Dan? What do you got?
So I'm actually looking up because it's been a while. I did the exact same thing. I wanted to start a little light. It's 1:00 here. And like I told you before we went on the air, that I do intend to hit the gym at some point today, but that might be a tenuous situation. So I'm going to start light too. I'm going with a Northwest Classic. This is a Widmer Hef. I haven't had a bottle of this in forever. When I first started drinking craft beers, probably 20-ish years ago, drank a lot of wheat-based beers and hefs.
Yeah, that was the same one I started with.
Into.
That's exactly.
And it was always in the Northwest. It was Pyramid and Widmer. And Widmer's Oregon, and Pyramid is largely Seattle, although they had some property in Oregon as well. So there's kind of a little bit of a rivalry between Pyramid and Widmer, but it's only 4.9% ABV. Thought it'd be a good one to start with. 2023 won the Best of Craft Beer Gold American Wheat Beer Gold Medal at the awards last year. 26 IBUs, 11.7% OG. And I'm going to take a little sip of this, see if it's as I remember.
I can't even imagine anybody out there listening that's not familiar with Widmer Hefeweizen.
Oh, it's fantastic.
That's really kind of been the standard for a long time. That was a long time ago, like 28 years ago, 30, maybe even 30 some odd years ago, they got started there in Portland.
Not too citrusy, which I like. And I am a big believer in the whole add a lemon to your Hefeweizen thing. If you need to squeeze a lemon into your Hef, it's not a good Hef.
Cheers. I've got the football pint going. Yep.
Oh, there you go.
All right, Keith, what are you drinking?
So I went the exact opposite direction you guys did. You went light. Oh, it's early. We were told to bring favorites, and so I went with the bourbon barrel aged barley wine from Freem. It's 11%, and
so Keith's got about 20 minutes of good content in him.
Yep. And then I'm going to be out.
Start with Keith.
Actually, or maybe it's the other way around.
The worst part about this
really
is
fun.
that because we said to bring favorites, the other two are also on the high end. So I'm probably going to be hidden under this desk here in a few hours.
Wow.
So
Nice.
keep the questions coming, folks, because we can see
All
how
right.
this
This
goes.
is just going to be kind of a round robin thing. We'll see how this goes. It's
Yeah.
just going to be one of those things. I'll ask the question. Both of you guys can respond. If one of you wants to take the lead, that's fine. I might have specific questions for Dan or Keith, and all the way around too. Keith's going to ask some questions. Dan's got some questions. We've got some listener questions that'll come in. I've got a few to start as well. Okay. First question. I'm going to ask this of Dan. What grade would you give John Schneider and company for the way they handled the letting go of Pete Carroll, the coaching search, and ultimately the hire of Mike McDonald and company?
I thought you were going to say the entire offseason. I like not knowing these questions ahead of time. I think for the most part, they handled it well. I'm not going to, and I mean, we've talked about this together. Like, I think the hire of Mike McDonald was a home run. I think given the other candidates that were on the market and given what I think they needed to kind of go in a little bit of a different direction, I think he was the best hire they could have made. But to get there, I do think they stumbled out of the gate. You know, I think we all kind of recognize now that the seeds of this decision went back into mid-season, perhaps. You know, there were reports that Schneider was putting a list together and that, you know, ownership and upper management was really upset, particularly after the Pittsburgh game. So if it goes back that far, and there's some other, you know, things that I've heard about what happened in the days between the Arizona game and the decision to let him go. There were some meetings and there were some negotiations, but the fact that they missed the window, I think knocks their grade a little bit. If they would have just
the window
gotten
as far as the interview,
the window as far as being able
itself?
to interview any of the candidates, right? By the time they let Pete go and filed their paperwork, they weren't able to interview the guys that were on buys, correct? Right? They missed that window. Ultimately, though, it didn't change the outcome. Like, they didn't miss out on anybody. It sounds now from some sources like McDonald was the guy that they targeted from the beginning, and they ended up getting him. It just, for that, I mean, maybe I give him a B plus. I do think they handled it as tactfully and with as much class as they could. Although it quickly, in my opinion, became a little bit awkward in giving him the advisor title, Pete Carroll. And then obviously, you know, we knew it at the time, and it became evident shortly after that was just in name only. He's not going to have an office in the building. I remember there were a lot of fans back then that thought he was still going to be involved in the coaching search and some of the personnel decisions. So that was a little weird and awkward. So for that reason, I knock him a little bit, but I think it was the right decision we made at the right time, and they got the right candidate, regardless of what happens moving forward. I think Schneider showed patience and determination in getting his guy. And that's not always easy in this league. Some teams end up settling for their second choice because they get impatient. And he didn't do that. And I give him a lot of credit for that. So let's say B plus.
I think you also need to take
grade.
into account some of the people that he interviewed, like the defensive coordinator for the Raiders. I don't even remember his name, but they interviewed him twice.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of head scratchers. It's like, okay, guy's barely been a coordinator for one season.
Mm-hmm.
And yet he's interviewing for a head coaching job multiple times. I'm glad it ended up well. Glad it turned out well, and that he ended up with McDonald, because there were some.
I don't think it was a great class. You know,
what do you mean?
I don't think it was a great group of candidates.
Yeah, it wasn't. And that's what I mean. Like, he was interviewing some guys, and I'm like, why are you even considering them? They don't belong in a head coaching search right now. And yeah, I mean, that part was frustrating. Ultimately, the end result is what it ended up being. Whether they screwed up the window in the beginning, whether they interviewed a bunch of candidates that shouldn't have been interviewed along the way, none of that matters, because they got the guy they wanted from the very beginning. They got the one home run hit out of this cycle.
I think it bears some resemblances to how how quickly the partnership worked when Pete Carroll was hired, and John Schneider had already been determined to be one of the 3 finalists, and so Pete ultimately made that decision, and they knew immediately that they clicked as a partnership. And I've been in the same room with these 2 guys at the same time. Like I think the partnership of Schneider and McDonald just clicked, and you can see it in the chemistry. That's hard to find. Let me ask you guys this: if in retrospect now that we know how everything turned out, if the hire had been Dan Quinn, which the minute Pete Carroll was let go, all the speculation was around that's the logical move, and it might happen quickly because it makes sense on some levels. How disappointing would you guys have been if that had been the choice? Would you have been okay with that?
I don't know if I would have been disappointed. I mean, I would have a little bit, because you kind of just want them to go big. And Dan Quinn isn't going big. When Paul Allen ran things, like, he went big to go get Mike Holmgren, and then he went big to go get Pete Carroll. Like, those were both just crazy, like, big hires, just big names. And okay, Paul Allen's not with us anymore, and his sister's running the team. I wanted them to go big, and Dan Quinn isn't that. But he was safe, and he knew the team, and he would go back to what made things work rather than the defense, which had just become a shell of its former self, in scheme and all of that. And so I think I would have been okay with it. But at the same time, yeah, it would have been a little disappointing, because they would have played it safe rather than going big. And I think they went big with Mike McDonald.
Yeah, I think it would have been fine, kind of to your point. Like, I think Dan has a shot to succeed in his second, go around. I like the things he's saying, and I like kind of what they're building there in Washington. And I think he was a little bit unfairly stigmatized by how things ended in Atlanta. But you're right. And it'd be, we'll never know, obviously, but it would be fascinating in an alternate universe to know how Paul Allen would have handled all this. Like, would he have moved on from Pete earlier when they struggled the last couple of years, or kind of, fell short of expectations? And if he was around, still on the team, was still alive when this move was made, you talk about big. Do you guys remember, what year was it? It must've been 16 or 17 when Jay Glazer reported that Pete Carroll was considering retirement. You remember this report? And Paul Allen was on a hunting trip somewhere, and Glazer came on and reported that Allen already has a fallback plan in the event that Carroll moves on, and it had 3 names on it. Do you remember the names? It was Bill Cowher. It was oh my God, it was Nick Saban, and it was, I think it might have been Jim Harbaugh at that time. I mean, he was a big game hunter, like you said. That was his MO.
Yeah.
And this offseason, the only name, if Paul Allen was alive this offseason, would he have gone after Bill Belichick? Would Harbaugh have been the hire? Right?
I'm not so sure. When you come off of Pete Carroll's the oldest coach in the NFL, and he had a certain style about him. He was kind of, very unique. Now, coming off of that and the success and so forth, it's really easy to make the safe hire. And that would have been a Belichick. That would have been a Dan Quinn. Really, there was nobody else available in the cycle unless you could have drawn somebody else out. But I think in what Schneider did, and we speculated about this a lot on our show, and you probably did as well. And Keith was kind of talking about Dan Quinn, felt like Dan Quinn was the early kind of favorite, until he wasn't, right? And you kind of go to that point where it really looks like they're waiting for, the Johnson from Detroit or McDonald from Baltimore to get out of the playoffs, and then they're going to they're going to press the go button. And that's exactly what happened. And I'm real pleased that I think it turned out exactly the way that, if you drew it up on paper, if this process would have started on time, with interviews right after the season ended, so they could at least get one in, I think it turned out exactly the way that it probably would have. I think you really have to hand it to John Schneider on the patience part of it, because it's so hard to be patient. in the NFL, the pressures are so intense to do it right and to get it right, and losing out on an opportunity or a candidate can be devastating, especially if you go all in. And I think you saw that in Washington. I think Washington really wanted one of the same two candidates that we were looking for, and they missed out on both of them. And Dan Quinn was plan C. And I think that would have been the view of the Seattle situation had we gone with Dan Quinn. So while I think it would have been okay, and we probably would have, continued on really kind of in kind of a father figure kind of coach coming in, now we've got an opportunity to really completely change the dynamic. One of my follow-up questions to my first question was, what kind of grade would you give Mike Macdonald on the way he built his coaching staff? And I would argue that the same sort of patience was kind of shown. He had a plan. John Schneider had a plan. They worked together to kind of bring Leslie Frazier in as a mentor, assistant head coach. That was brilliant to me. And then the Grubb signing and pulling him back away from Alabama, and so on and so forth.
And those are the things
really
that I think
a home run.
Those are the things I think would be different, right? I mean, what you guys and I do, on our shows, like the offseason narrative would have been completely different. I think there would be much more of the fan base questioning the hire and more cynical about what the next step is. Whereas, I think almost universally, there's a lot of optimism right now among the fan base, but the coordinator choices would have been different too. Would Dan Quinn have hired Cliff Kingsbury here? I mean, that might have set the fan base on fire.
Yeah.
Especially
Keith. Keith does not like that guy.
Yeah.
I don't like him as a head coach. He was a failed head coach in college. Why would you hire him as a head coach in the NFL? But as an offensive coordinator, the reason why he got head coaching opportunities both in college and in the pros was because he was a brilliant offensive coordinator. So I wouldn't have hated it. But hiring him as a head coach was just an idiotic move by Arizona. I just think about all of this, and I go back to, if the Seahawks had that first meeting, if they hadn't missed that window and they'd met with McDonald early and they were like, "Oh, great, this is done," I think this whole process would have been different. And I go back to 2014 when Dan Quinn was hired by Atlanta away from Seattle, and they had done that. They had met with them during that early window and kind of decided he was going to be their guy.
Mm-hmm.
And even though the Seahawks were in the playoffs, heading to the Super Bowl, all of that, and they had to wait, it didn't bother them that they had to wait that long because they already had their guy. And while they waited, he was able to hire Shanahan, and then Shanahan was able to put the offensive staff together, and those kind of things that happened, while Atlanta was technically waiting to officially hire Quinn. I think it would have looked a lot more like that had the Seahawks gotten the Pete Carroll thing done a day or two earlier, so they could have gotten to McDonald. I don't think it would have changed the outcome. I think it would have, Grubb just wouldn't have ever made it to Alabama. I think he would have just gone straight to Seattle. And that kind of stuff. Now, there might be some position coaches and that kind of stuff that ended up different, but in the end, like the big pieces, I think the story would have been different, but the outcome would have been the same.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. You wonder if the defensive staff would have looked a little bit different, because he would have had a chance to get in on those guys early and make them offers. And then, as the playoffs went on, then all of his, key defensive assistants started to get interview requests themselves. And 3 of them end up being hired as defensive coordinators, 2 of them elsewhere, and 1 got elevated to replace him. So maybe Aden Dirty isn't the defensive coordinator, but, but yeah,
he's not
might
really
not have changed anything on offense because it sounded like he had his eye on Grubb for a little while. So,
okay. So, who else has got a question? I'm sure you guys came equipped, right?
Did you guys mentioned Leslie Frazier? Did you guys see his interview with on Move the Sticks?
I watched the first 10 minutes and then I ran out of time and I haven't come back to it.
Keith, did you see any of that?
No, I haven't seen it at all. So, what did I miss?
It was cool. Must see TV. Like it's Bucky Brooks and Daniel Jeremiah.
Yeah.
And they got into some pretty specific stuff, mostly about they were trying to kind of blanket the conversation with, how do you keep the secondary connected to what's happening up front and some of those principles. But he kept like name checking guys on the Seahawks. And one thing that he kept saying over and over, he kept going to Rick Woolen. And he was asked a specific question about how do you recognize that a guy is ready to be a true shutdown corner? And by that, Bucky framed the question as, when do you decide a guy, or what do you need to see from a guy to recognize that he's capable of traveling with a number one receiver? And he said, he gave his answer, and then he said, we were able to do that with Tre'Davious in in Buffalo. And we think we'll be able to do that with Reek too.
Wow.
Like that they think that they might see, for all the questions this offseason about him coming off a down year, and maybe you trade him because they have depth there, and that Leslie Frazier, with all his time in the league and working together with Mike McDonald, that they might see Rick Woolen as a guy that could travel with a team's wide receiver one. It was fascinating.
Based on
after
what we
his
saw as a
rookie,
rookie, I'm not surprised
after his
at
rookie
all.
season, I could see that. I don't know exactly what happened last year. He had the injury, Keith. He had the injury, and then he kind of lost his confidence. And he still played well in the larger picture of things, given the fact that the entire defense played like crap. But certainly a letdown from his rookie season. And then I'm very curious to see how this coaching staff can get him to play.
Didn't underperform last year. This is the statement I keep coming back every time Bill and I have this car. Who on defense didn't underperform? Every single player except for maybe Witherspoon underperformed last year. And so I can't really hold that against him. Go back and look at his rookie year. He was as close to a shutdown corner as this team has had since Richard Sherman. And yeah, I'm not surprised they're talking about moving him. But the fact that you've got him, that they're talking about, oh, he's a shutdown guy, he's the guy that you'd move around. You've still got Witherspoon on this defense.
Mm-hmm.
He's still one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL.
It's one of the things that gives me that I'm most excited about this offseason is you talk about the issues on the back end last year, and we've heard enough players talk about it, and some of them are kind of thinly veiled shots at the coaching staff, but just about the poor communication and guys just not understanding their assignments and where they're supposed to be. And everything you read about McDonald and how he teaches and how he installs and keeps it really simple, and then makes all the keys, based off in sometimes one word audibles and calls, and to just simplify it so guys can just play fast and instinctive, because that's what we saw from Rick Woolen as a rookie. Is just, I remember the pick he had in Detroit where he undercut that ball in the middle of the field, and that was just pure instincts. He came off his guy, right? He read the play, he read Goff's eyes, and he just came over and made a play, and he looked like a 5-time All-Pro. If you can get that guy in a position to where you get his confidence back and just let him play, confident and free and easy. We're all going to be really glad they didn't give up on that guy just because he had one, seemingly down year, which may have been related to an injury.
Yeah.
Keith, you got a question for Dan?
I got a question later, Dan. What is your Seahawk tattoo? Like, where is it? What is it?
So it's basically evolved into a sleeve. It started with and for those of you watching, I'll try and show as much as I can. It started with I have a skyline, Seattle skyline here. You can see the Space Needle and Mount Rainier and Lumen Field. Although at the time I got the tattoo, it was CenturyLink. And then the forearm is a little harder to show, but it's on the backside. It's Steve Largent making sort of that. It's one of the most iconic pictures of him. It's in the Kingdom, or it's in Lumen Field. My God, I'm showing my age. He's kind of laying out for a ball on the inside of the forearm.
There you go.
On the inside of the forearm, I've got Marshawn. Just, not necessarily my two favorite players, but some of it's visual too. I just wanted Marshawn to represent that Super Bowl year. You can see the Super Bowl number behind him. The Lombardi Trophy is up here. This is supposed to kind of look like crowds in the background. The 12th flag is back there somewhere, kind of worked in all around it. Interestingly enough, I got to show this to Marshawn 2 weeks ago.
Nice.
He was dining in our restaurant and just being chill as always, just not even like a private booth or anything. He was just with some friends, just at a table right in the middle of the dining room. and he'd come into the server station where we were hanging out to ask about something and to deal with his server. And I took the opportunity to show him, and he like grabbed my forearm and he looked at it kind of really closely for a couple seconds. And then he looked up, and these are his exact words. He goes, "That's a dope tat, bro." Dope tat.
Nice.
And then I pointed out,
awesome.
I showed him Largent, and I said, he kind of made a little self-deprecating age joke about himself. So I showed him Largent, and I said, so I got the old school, and then I got, and then he cut me off, and he goes, oh, and then the old school too. So that was kind of cool. But yeah, I think Seahawks wise, I'm kind of done. I think that's complete. So, yeah.
So I have a follow-up question. One of our best listeners out there, Kristen, from our YouTube channel, has a follow-up question for Keith on that. Is, Keith, which is your favorite tattoo? Your favorite,
My favorite
Seahawks
tattoo.
Or favorite tattoo in general? So,
oh man, I've got so many favorites. They're all favorite. Every single one of the ones I got, I freaking love. I love my cat. Which I'll see if I can show that on YouTube.
Let me see if I can get you.
Nope, it's getting in the way. Right.
I think
so. It's a cat playing with an atom, colored in as a galaxy. I love that one. I don't know why that one kind of stands out, but it does. But then my most recent one is my Seahawk tattoo. What's the best?
That's the old school. Yeah.
Yeah.
I considered that design when I got my first one of my first tattoos. Yeah.
Yeah. So that one's awesome, and it's actually better. It's more than just my Seahawk tat, and that I love for that reason. It's also one that I share. Like, me and a friend both got it, and she's been battling cancer, and she's been getting matching tattoos with all the people that have supported her during her cancer fight. And I know that she just had like her 28th surgery as part of that. So to give you an idea of where she's at. And so that one's really special to me for a lot of different reasons, but the fact that it's also a Seahawk one does not diminish it in any way. I freaking love it. And so those are probably my two favorites.
Bill, do you have any?
I do not.
Keith, do you have any tattoo regrets?
Yeah, I do have one. I got a wedding ring tattoo, and it blew out and turned out just ugly because the artist that did it just overpacked everything, and it turned out nasty. And I had to have it redone by a different artist. And even then, it's not what I wanted. At least it looks good now, but it still wasn't what it was supposed to be. That's my only tattoo regret, is just having the wrong person do one.
Yeah, I did that early on. My first one got me hooked, and then I rushed into a couple of little things after that I almost immediately regretted. But it taught me an important lesson, that you pay for tattoos.
Yes, you
don't. Tattoos, LASIK surgery. There are certain things that you don't take the discounted deal, right? You don't take the one that's on sale.
Absolutely.
And so I had those covered up. But one of my biggest regrets is actually because it turned out so good. So I don't know if we're going to talk about music today at all, but this is from an old Journey album cover. It's from the Evolution album. And it turned out so great. This is 10 years old, and it still looks almost brand new. Like, I like it so much.
Awesome.
And it gets the most comments. But my regret is that I didn't do it on the inside of my forearm, because I can't see it. Like, if I could do it all over again, I would have put it on the inside so I could see it every day.
I saw you on another social media channel comment the fact that Journey is your favorite band, and you've seen them live 10 times. I think I beat you. I think I've seen them live like 13 or 14 times since 1981.
I'm going to add one to that in
82.
September. So, yeah.
Yeah. Me too. Yeah. I'm going to
the Def Leppard
Journey and Def Leppard at Chase Field, downtown Phoenix, at the end of August there. So with Steve Miller
who's opening on that bill? Because it's rotating.
Steve Miller Band.
Okay, here we're getting Cheap Trick. I was a little disappointed.
I've seen Cheap Trick open for different bands like 100 times. Damn. And it's usually, I go get my beer, I settle down, and Cheap Trick's just getting off the stage. I've seen them so much. They're just one of those typical, like, get the crowd going bands that sometimes I'm into it, and sometimes I'm just like, yeah, I've seen them so many, I just don't even care. But
they were actually the first band I ever saw live, because when I was 13 years old, they opened for Kiss. at my first concert ever. So the
Nice.
first band I ever saw was literally Cheap Trick. So,
Wow.
but you're right.
The first
they're
band I ever saw was Ted Nugent and Hart in downtown Seattle at not Franklin Field. What's the field there at Seattle Center?
Oh, it's Memorial Field.
Memorial Stadium Field, right? They were there, and this was like 1970s.
Oh, pre-MTV Hart.
7.
Yeah,
this is right after
they just
Dreamboat
rocked and
Annie
didn't
came
put
out.
any makeup on.
Right. This is what's the second album after where Barracuda came out? I can't. Little Queen, something like that.
Yeah.
That's the one. So okay. So
this is my favorite part. This is my favorite part of when the three of us get together is that you guys are both audiophiles and just are into that scene. And I just love to sit in here listening because I've been to a couple concerts, but I've been to my whole life about is less than what Bill does in a year.
Yeah.
And Dan too. Dan's crazy.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what.
I just love listening to you guys talk about it. It's just awesome.
So I was going to, one of my questions.
Where the concert industry is right now.
Oh, so it's horrible.
You know, I've been waiting 10 years.
Expensive to go to. Like
I've been waiting for 10 years for Creed to reunite, and have been predicting it for the last 4 or 5 because it was obvious that it was going to happen. And they finally do this massive tour, and they're ignoring the Northwest in its entirety. And so I've looked at places to go, and it's like, forget airfare. It's $800 to get a ticket, and it's just dumb. It's dumb. I really, we said we weren't going to talk about politics, but I'm really rooting for the Justice Department in their lawsuit against Live Nation and Ticketmaster because it is a monopoly and the fans are the losers and it needs to be fixed.
I agree. Okay. So follow-up question in broad terms. Keith, you can participate if you want. Favorite concert. So I'm going to go first because I want to answer my own question. So Pink Floyd, I saw them in the Division Bell concert series. And then, what was it? Not Division Bell, but Momentary Lapse of Reason. So I saw both those tours. That was amazing. But I am seeing David Gilmour at the Hollywood Bowl in October, and he's only doing shows in New York and LA currently. And so I had to go. I had to get tickets. I'm going in for just one night and back out, but I think that's going to end up being in my top 5, and I don't even know what his set list is yet, but it's going to be amazing. And then I got to say, Alan Parsons Project, Tom Petty at the Gorge was a fantastic show. And then I just saw last year U2 at the Sphere, which was, it just automatically goes into your top 3 shows because the Sphere itself is just is kind of the highlight, and then whatever band's going on, it's crazy. But how about you guys?
Keith, you got a favorite?
I do have a favorite, but it's recent. I took my dad and my kid, so we had three generation of Myers men to see the Eagles last year at
that's a good show live.
And honestly, like they're a bunch of old guys, but damn, they can still shred. They're fucking awesome, and I don't like that cost a lot to get the 3 of us in there, and I do not regret a single penny of that. It was a tremendous show. Their set list was like 40 songs long. And it
would have to be, you know,
I saw them at the Footprint here in Phoenix last, about like four months ago. And they were okay. Like Vince Gill had a cold and they were just off. Whatever reason they were off that night. I'd seen him in their Hell Freezes Over tour before. So I saw him with Glenn Fry and the whole, the original kind of lineup there. And they were amazing. I was just thrilled. And this time it was a little bit more disappointing, but I get you. That was, they do such a tremendous job really, and just kind of play note for note. They're kind of one of those session bands from the old days. And so they're very keen on duplicating the album sound and so forth. And it's kind of like Styx. I don't know if anyone's seen Styx.
Oh yeah. Kind
of the same thing. They really try to duplicate the albums note for note on stage. And
Styx is one of those rare bands that even at their age, like they still sound phenomenal. Like that's not always the case. That's the other thing. Like concerts are so expensive now, but yet you don't know what you're going to get. Like you might go see an old vintage nostalgic act and the singer can't sing anymore. Like it's trying to come up with my favorite show of all time.
Bill and I have seen that. The singer can't sing anymore. Remember when I went, took my wife and I and you and your ex to Foreigner, and God,
Kelly Hansen was the lead singer.
Who was the second of the three shows? It was Whitesnake. That's who it was. And God, not only did they look freaking like they got group rate on plastic surgery, but they couldn't sing anymore. They couldn't pretty much it was the drummer and a bunch of amateurs, but it wasn't. It was like the actual people.
But it's still David Coverdale. Yeah. I've seen videos and
it was bad.
They have to, just to even give him a shot to sing the songs, they have to tune down like a couple of full steps to the point that like the songs that you're so used to, like they're not even recognizable.
It's true. Yeah, no, it's true. So now, and he's amazing. And when he was younger, he was amazing. Yeah. He just had one of those voices. But I'm telling you what, like Tommy Aldridge on the drums. So Tommy Aldridge used to play with like Ozzy Osbourne. He was like on all the best songs that Ozzy ever had, off his first 2 or 3 albums. And like Bark at the Moon, all that kind of stuff. So Tommy Aldridge was definitely the highlight of that show. But Tommy Aldridge looked like he was dead. Like he was like Skeletor.
He did.
He just looked like Skeletor. I was like, what is going on? Yeah, it was amazing. But other than that, who else? So okay, let's do another.
Well, let me answer the question though. I want to answer my favorite concert, right?
Okay.
So. And this one's hard because I kind of go back and forth between like what was just the greatest show I saw and then what kind of had the biggest impact. Right. And like oddly enough, I don't think my favorite show of all time is a Journey show. I mean, those are all right up there. I mean, I got to see Steve Perry in his prime multiple times and on some great tours. I mean, I'll never forget the Frontiers tour when he had Bryan Adams opening.
Oh yeah.
And Bryan Adams was young. And they opened their tour. There's a documentary out there that NFL Films created. You can find it on YouTube still, documenting the Frontiers tour. It's amazing. It spends a lot of time looking into like the crew and what it takes to like put on a show and a tour.
Wow.
But they opened in Seattle. They built their stage here. They spent 2 weeks rehearsing here, and then they opened it here. And Bryan Adams was relatively unknown. He had like one hit.
Well, he was unknown. That was it.
That's like a knife, I think, was on the radio. Yeah.
Concert. Yeah.
By the time at the end of that tour, it came all the way back around. They played Tacoma again, like 10 months later, almost at the end of the tour. So they made a complete loop of the country, which no one does anymore. And by that time, Bryan Adams was massive. So to see like the progression was really cool. But I have 2 that come to mind. One is I was reminded of this the other day. I was just going down a YouTube rabbit hole and somebody posted a complete concert that was shot really well and had soundboard audio of Bon Jovi on the New Jersey tour.
Wow.
And we all have recency bias of like what a gray-haired 50, 60-year-old John Bon Jovi looks and sounds like now. You forget how unbelievable he was as a front man back then. And they were so much energy and just the way he worked a stage and his vocal ability back then.
Dude, I've got a story.
It reminded me of the show that I saw on the New Jersey tour in Tacoma, where they actually shot the video for Lay Your Hands on Me. And that was the tour where they had the catwalk. And so even though I was sitting about halfway back in the crowd, about halfway up, at one point they go on the catwalk together and they're right in front of my face. So that probably has to be the one. Like that was Bon Jovi at their prime. And oh, by the way, Skid Row opened up for him in their prime.
Wow.
And Sebastian Bach was just
unbelievable. So I saw Bon Jovi in their very first large concert ever at BC Place in Vancouver on the Runaway Tour, opening for the Scorpions.
Okay.
Damn. And I was in the front row. And
see, so back then you could do that. Did you just walk
row
into
center? I just squeezed up there. I just totally squeezed up there. And I got up there pre-show, and like Bon Jovi came out, and it was front and center, and he was right in front of me, and then Klaus Meine was right in front of me after that, and it was one of those shows that, and I was 19 years old, and It just blew me away. I was like, this is a show. I mean, it was one of those things where, you know, you're going to, because you know, like 5 songs, you know, at least back then it was like on the radio, and I bought an album. I didn't know who Bon Jovi was at the time. And so I was just going to see the Scorpions, really. And then Bon Jovi comes out and like blew everyone away. And like, you know, everyone was, and everyone being all the ladies just absolutely just loved him, screaming like crazy up there. And then the Scorpions came on. It was just a juxtaposition of style, because it was just this prima donna kind of caricature.
Concerts will never be like they were back then. And that's why all my memories that are popping into my head now are of seeing those bands in their prime, because fans were completely engaged, right? And you watch some of those videos, even if they're poor quality, and it just gives you goosebumps because the crowd is into every single moment and every single song. And now it's like the place can be sold out. And I've been guilty of this too. Everyone's got their phone up and they want to be quiet because they're trying to capture the perfect video. And that's their memory of you know, this show forever, is they can watch that video on their phone, where these memories that we're having are like visceral and they give me goosebumps.
And you live in the moment. You got to live in the moment.
It was and how it felt. Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
It'll never
All right.
be like that again.
One more off topic, and then we'll go back to football a little bit. Well, first, let's do this. Let's pour another beer.
That is a fantastic idea.
I was just
I finished
my
first one.
I don't think I'm getting to the gym, you guys. I already just down the first beer went down really easily.
So Keith, what are you going to switch to here?
My beer was 11%. So that one.
Are you done with it?
One, yeah. My last one was a bourbon barrel aged barley wine. My next one is going to be another barley wine. But it's maple. It's a maple barley wine from Freem.
Wow.
This one runs, if I remember right, about 12 and a half.
This is gonna get good.
11 and a half. I remember that slightly wrong. I said this is it's already ready getting bad. It's only going to get worse. But this is, you guys. The thing was, it said bring your favorite. Well, you know what? My favorites are all typically barrel aged. They're typically imperial, and they're typically dark.
Let's see that thing. Let's see that.
And this one is much darker than the last one.
That looks
Look
hardy.
at that frosty mug too. I love that.
Yeah.
Yep.
That looks viscous.
You probably can't see it, but there's the Seahawks Playbook logo right there. If it wasn't quite so dark, you'd be able to see it.
Yeah. I've got that one. So I'll show the logo really quick.
Here, while you're doing that,
Here's what it looks like.
I'm gonna run and put my third one back in the fridge because it's gonna get warm. Be right back.
See, the nice thing about ones that are this dark and this strong is they actually taste a little better when they're not quite so cold. Now, you don't want them warm. You don't want them room temperature, but you don't want them, 42 degrees out of your fridge. You want them about 45, 48 degrees, somewhere in that range. And so I'm actually in good shape.
It's time for amateur hour. Time for amateur hour here when it comes to beer pouring. I love this beer, but it can't compete with you. So this is a 4.5% alcohol by volume. It's a little bit more my speed, Keith. It's Smithwick's Red Ale, directly from Dublin, Ireland. Now, I fell in love with this beer.
That's a good.
I fell in love with this beer when I was in Dublin a couple years ago, and it's kind of my go-to there because I just love ambers. I'm kind of an amber guy, and this thing is gorgeous. So. It's gorgeous. It's a little darker on the camera than it is, and it's kind of really dark amber, and but it just has a real nice smooth taste. There's no after bitterness about it. It's one of those beers one of those ambers that you can drink even when it's really hot outside, which is really important to me here in Phoenix. And so nice and refreshing and tasty at the same time, and it's only 4.5%. So it's one of those beers that I can have, maybe even 2 or 3 of, and not feel so heavy and weighted down, and obviously not so lightheaded, if you will. And
I
try that. I've been looking for lighter beers recently, lighter by lower ABV a little bit, and just not as heavy. Sorry. The automatic cat feeder. It's cat feeding time. So I'm going to go for my second one. This is from Reuben's Brews. This is their Hazelicious Hazy IPA. I know we did hazies the last time we did a show together. But this is one that I happen to have in my fridge. This one is 6% ABV, 45 IBUs, kind of middle of that range. It's got some Citra, Comet, Simcoe, Strata, and Azaka hops.
Nice.
And
Wow.
honey, oats, pale pilsner, and wheat malts. So it's a whole bunch of kind of whole melting pot. And you inspired me to get
an IPA. This is an IPA, Dan?
It is. It's a hazy IPA from Reuben.
So it's an East Coast style?
Pretty much anytime you hear the word Citra in a hops, it's going to be an IPA. And yeah, hazy is a New England style, as opposed to a Northwest style, which is typically very clear.
Which I'm going to finish with a bigger IPA as my third one. But Bill and I were talking about this off air a little bit. Like, IPAs are getting harder for me to drink. My palate's just changing. Just some of them are just so hoppy, which is why the hazies are kind of a nice sort of a middle ground between an amber and an IPA.
Because the hazies are getting more. They're fruitier. They're more citrusy, but they're not quite so just pure bitter. The pure Northwest IPAs are getting really strong. And just
for a while.
Straight up like just hop tea. And it's getting overpowering.
I don't know if you guys are paying attention to the comments in the live stream comments. You can find that over on the right side.
I didn't have it on.
Top of our app here. But the last question just came in, and nice comments so far, and this one's nice as well. Bob Holness is asking, nice choice of beer, guys. Do any of you like Belgian beers? Leffe and Chimay are my personal favorites.
I do like Belgian beers. They're a little, for people who aren't used to them, because typically they're a little more wild yeast, so they've got some other flavors that are involved in a true Belgian style. Some of them are really good. Some of them can get funky really quick. But there's a few out there that I really like. I just really enjoy. So,
20 years ago,
Chimay stuff a lot, but I haven't heard of the Leffe.
20 years ago, I was managing a restaurant that had 160 beers on tap, and I was responsible for all that inventory and the ordering. And so shout out to Eric Briggs, who's in the comments, his favorite concert, Pearl Jam at Benaroya Hall. Good old friend of mine, friend of the show. And we actually met at this particular place that I'm thinking about, a place called Tap House Grill that doesn't even exist anymore. But it was really cool. It was kind of patterned after I'm sure you both are familiar with the Yard House chain. It was kind of patterned off that sort of concept. Good quality food, and then a really good beer lineup, 160. And so when I first started working there, like the strongest beer I would ever drink is like a Manny's, right? Like a pale. By the time I was the GM there for 2 years, by the time I was done, I was having a couple of Belgians every night after work, and haven't probably had one since. I gained so much weight in that last year, because Belgians are very, very rich and heavy. They also make you very, very hungry, which would make me eat really terrible food at the end of the day, which is the worst thing you can do. Because when you have a little bit of a buzz, you've had a couple of beers, you don't crave kale. No, that's not going to
crave kale anytime.
You crave
beers or not
nachos. And
all right, guys. So let's get back to football. Let's talk Seahawks football. I've got a question for you. Dan, you go first. Keith, you can follow up. Of the top 3 picks in this year's draft, Seahawks picks, which player has the best opportunity to have the greatest impact on the field?
As a rookie or overall?
As a rookie.
Career.
As a rookie.
I think it's Byron Murphy. I think that he's such a dynamic. We don't even know if Christian Haynes is going to get on the field. Like, I think this McClendon Curtis stuff is real. I kind of do. And so Haynes might be more of a long-term play, and maybe ultimately
The
he
Seahawks,
even
the
gets moved.
Seahawks have McClendon Curtis listed over at left guard on the depth chart too. I'm just
On
curious
left.
about that.
Interesting.
On
Yeah.
the left, behind Lake and Tomlinson. And they still have
I wonder if that was
Anthony
only because Bradford was hurt during OTA.
as the number one right guard.
Now that would make all the sense in the world. Kind of to get off topic for a little bit, if they saw Curtis long term on the left side after a year of Tomlinson, that would make a lot of sense. But anyway,
I think he was getting all those reps just in case. I really do. Now I think that Anthony Bradford always had the inside leg on this because he had 10 starts last year. But Christian Haynes, come on, I do believe by the end of training camp, Christian Haynes wins that job. Now that anything can happen, but I expect that. Now, Anthony Bradford, though, if you really go look at the advance, we were like the offensive line was crap last year, right? And Anthony Bradford was part of that, but he played okay to the point where Seahawks fans are like, well, we could plug Anthony Bradford in there. Well, if you go look at the advanced stats, he was just not that good. Now, he was a rookie, but is he the long-term answer? We just don't know that yet. He's kind of a road grader kind of a guy, but the pass blocking was really questionable last year. Christian Haynes would be the automatic upgrade at that position. So I fully expect him to kind of take that. And then Bradford's sitting there, very capable as being a backup. But then on the other side, you mentioned McClendon Curtis, a guy that we really hadn't paid attention to. Seahawks picked off a practice squad last year, kept him on the active roster so they could keep him.
Yeah,
gave him
just kept name dropping
an advanced contract this last year, a futures deal, and here he is competing his ass off. Right, that's the cool thing about this team this year is everybody's competing again. It's like nobody's going to be handed a job straight out of the gate. Yeah, they've looked at the film, they've got some ideas about who they want to have be successful and start. Both on offense and defense, but these guys are really getting a look this year, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. But to answer the question though, I think it's Byron Murphy. I think he's an elite talent. I really do. I loved the pick to begin with. He was my favorite pick leading up to the draft. It was kind of rubbing my eyes. Couldn't believe that things fell the way that they did. To me, it was a no-brainer when they were on the clock. And I think he's so good. I think he's going to have an outstanding career. If he can keep if he can manage and handle, that transition to being a professional football player, that I think they're going to carve out a role for him as a rookie. And I think he'll force his way into the field. He's that good. I mean, I've never been so impressed with a defensive lineman in my life, just watching him work a blocking sled. Like, I know that might sound ridiculous.
His legs are tree trunks.
Amazing. Like the strength in his punch, and then his foot quickness to just make those subtle little movements to get around a guy. And then, and not even to mention, like, I mean, that would play into his pass rush ability. But when you watch his tape and you see him, I just always tell people, if you haven't watched Byron Murphy yet, go find his Alabama tape. You can find it on YouTube, all 22, and go watch him against Alabama. They're double teaming him the whole game. And he's still affecting the play, impacting the play, because that base, like what he's able to do with that butt and those thighs.
Well, you remember obviously Earl Campbell from the Houston Oilers, right?
Oh, of course.
And how big his legs were when you saw him in person. And I did a couple, 3-4 different times. I was, in the Kingdom, and the dude's leg, that's all you saw when you saw him in person. And he was just a truck, but his lower body was just amazing. So is Byron Murphy's. Byron Murphy's legs are he's got so much torque available in his lower half that's where he's going to win. Seriously, that dude's going to have an amazing, I think, career. Now, I don't know if he's going to start the first 6 games out. Is he going to be all world? I don't know. Maybe.
He might not. Yeah, he might not ever be the starter. But he'll rotate in. I think Mike McDonald wants to get back to that kind of Pete Carroll 2012 to 2015 thing where they're rotating guys and keeping them fresh. But he may.
That's why I asked the question, to be completely honest, Dan. It's who is going to have the most impact on the field? Now,
still think he will.
Byron Murphy, yes. Okay, but you could say, and hear me out, Tyrese Knight. Now,
Maybe.
I'm
might have
not
to.
saying that he's going to be all world. I'm not saying that. I'm just
but the
saying
rest of
that
the middle
there are
linebackers
question
are hurt.
marks. There are
Right.
question marks at linebacker right now
Have
that
to.
give him a significant opportunity
Kid's
to
gonna
be
play.
on the field more than you would want, and so he could end up racking up some stats this year that impact games or have plays that result in turnovers, and so now he could conversely be on the wrong end of that, where he could be the weakest link on the team, which I believe maybe at least starting out he would be, but as time goes on, he could eventually have an impact level that is the most visible on the team. Now, Byron Murphy's going to be there in the center, in the middle. Sometimes those guys get lost in the shuffle. Maybe they're not stackers, and they make things happen for other players.
Yeah.
Byron Murphy
I
might fall
think
into
he
that
certainly
bucket
could
in
be
this
that
first
guy, too.
season.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Christian Haynes could start all year and be an impact guy, but he's in the interior of the offensive line. Tyrese Knight could be a guy that could rack up 10 tackles a game and have a pass breakup and have an impact on the players around him. And I'm just saying he might have the most impact on the field in 2024.
I still think the answer is
Go ahead.
Murphy. I just think that his ability to affect plays, you're going to, even if he doesn't play much, when he does play, he's going to show up. He's going to affect plays. He's either going to be getting sacks, getting pressure, disrupting a run play by getting into the backfield. He's just too freaking good. Like I said, even if he doesn't play much, Tyrese Knight can play every down and rack up a ton of tackles. And I think you're going to see a lot more highlights of Byron Murphy anyway.
And Knight's got to earn the shot first, right? I think it's going to be one of the most interesting storylines in camp is he's third team right now on the Seahawks depth chart. I mean, Baker and Dodson were out all of minicamp and OTAs, and it wasn't Knight running in their place. It was O'Connell and it was Radigan. So like he's got to get his shit together and get into even the second team conversation first. Now, I do think they might carve out a role for him. You know, I think he's a guy that can maybe even play on the edge a little bit, just kind of in some packages and with what McDonald likes to do in disguising things. But I mean, if we were making a list of like 3 most intriguing players heading into camp, he'd probably be on that list because, you know, he had so many detractors, just of the draft pick himself. Was he too raw? Was he taken a little too early? But then you find out that John Schneider essentially deferred to Mike McDonald on that pick and that they moved down in that round knowing they'd miss out on Cedric Gray and a couple others because they were confident they could still get him. And that's the guy McDonald wanted that, like, you know, until he proves otherwise, I'm bullish. I'm bullish on that pick, but it might take a little while.
Well, and McDonald knows linebackers.
Yeah.
Like if it was, you know, if he had done that for a safety, I would have been like, okay, but he's not a defensive back coach, but he knows linebackers. So as much as I didn't necessarily love that pick because I don't think he covers well, I don't think he does, you know, he is, he's an old school linebacker who comes up and makes plays at the line of scrimmage against the running game in a league that no longer runs the ball that much. You know what? Mike McDonald knows linebackers. He was a linebacker coach before he was a defensive coordinator, and I'm going to defer to him until I'm told otherwise. You know what I mean?
Right.
Until something happens on the field that makes me doubt that call.
So let's ease into the offensive side of the ball as far as a question. Let me ask you both, in your estimation at the end of the season, let's look into the crystal ball. Which side of the ball will have had the best season? Dan.
It's an interesting question because, you know, it's perception is such a, you know, fragile thing that I think that I expect the defense to improve dramatically. When you think about it in terms of even if they end up being a league average middle of the pack defense this year, that's a massive jump, right?
Yeah, it is.
From 30th, 31st in most categories.
15, right?
Yeah, right? You wouldn't be considered one of the elite defenses in the league, but that's a huge jump. And then I think the general perception by the end of the year would be that, hey, the defense is back. This is a defensive football team again. But what I see when I look at offense is all the continuity in the skill positions, that if that offensive line can be manageable in its first year, because offensive lines need continuity too. I would expect, I like the pieces they put in place. I like the fact that we're talking about guys that might be third on the depth chart as having an actual shot to start. I think they've added some good young dynamic talent in a more, more volume to that spot than they have in a while. And that gives me hope. But if things, it's going to take a while. And so there might be fits and starts this year on the offensive line, but if they can be manageable and allow Ryan Grubb to operate that offense the way he wants to, with a, an experienced quarterback coming back and all of his weapons in place, and you even added a couple of things to that, I think the defense getting to average will allow this offense to blossom. And I think if we're going to win games this year, 9, 10, 11 games, it'll be because the defense improves to the point that it lets that offense flourish. And I think that offense is much, much better than people outside the Pacific Northwest are giving it credit for. And it's because they discount the fact that part of the reason they weren't as productive last year is because they were dead last in the league in number of plays run because the defense stunk so bad. So I think at the end of the season, we might be looking at that offense saying that's what carried us this year.
So I'm going to pause everything just real quick. I want to remind everybody that Dan Viens is here as our guest, Seahawks Forever Podcast. You can find it on your favorite podcast platforms, both on audio and video. Talk to me, Dan, just a second about your show, what you've been talking about, what's coming up.
Yeah, Seahawks Forever has been about 1.5 years now since I rebranded it after Vox Media shut down all their podcasts and the Field Goals podcast went away. Longtime former, way back in the day, television broadcast journalist and play-by-play guy, and so the focus of my show and just the way that my brain works, and so the way that I present my show is I think similar to what you guys do, although you guys get the gift of being able to play off of each other, which is nice. Is I just try to take a thoughtful look and a balanced look at what's happening with the team, both on and off the field. I'm excited that it's July. Happy July, you guys! Like, happy training camp month.
Yeah,
we get to
3
know.
weeks away.
We get
We're
to
only
say
a
this
couple
month
weeks
now.
away. It's weird.
Yeah, 17 days from rookies.
Yeah,
and then we get some real substance. So, the next couple of weeks are interesting. I'm working on my all underrated team right now. There's polls up on Twitter. They should be finishing up any moment. If you haven't gone over there, if you're listening or watching, get over there and get your vote in. And then I'm going to do an all overrated team. That's the kind of stuff that during slower times, I'm sure you guys know that you kind of lean into. But I've got a couple things up my sleeve too. A couple of big time guests that I'm really, really excited about getting on between now and the time of training camp, just matching up vacations and schedules and things like that. So I like having guests on the show, so keep an eye out for that.
Nice. Love it. Right on. Okay. Dan, do you have any questions?
Oh, so I'm fascinated by this, and it's been a lot of fun to go down memory lane. The last couple of weeks, I did another podcast where we kind of put together an all-time team. And then you struggle a little bit sometimes with some people's definition of overrated and underrated, but they're fun concepts to play with. So I'd like to get your guys' thoughts on a couple of players, regardless of position, regardless of era, like that you think in Seahawks history get overlooked. Now, maybe they were really good starters. This doesn't have to be a rotational player or role player. Sometimes some of the best players we've had in our history get overlooked over time or just overshadowed by other players. Keith, start with you. Just a couple guys that immediately come to mind of players that you think are really overrated. Underrated. I'm sorry.
Really
underrated.
Okay. Underrated.
Undervalued.
First, when you said that, the first name that came to mind was Max Strong. It was a fullback, but he was a guy that could pick up a blitz as well as anyone, receive the ball out of the backfield, take a draw from Matt Hasselbeck and do stuff with it on, third and medium. And plus he's got the best name. Like, that's a perfect name for a fullback, right? You got right. Max
or a linebacker. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fullback or linebacker. You got to play one of them.
honestly, he was the first name that came to mind for like underrated former Seahawk. And then after that, probably, do you remember Anthony Simmons?
Yeah.
Middle linebacker.
He's in the
Pretty
poll.
Tupu, undersized, fast, injury prone, but the dude, God, the guy was fast. And when he was healthy, he made a lot of other holes disappear because of his speed. And I really liked watching him play. So those are the first two names that popped into my head.
14 or 15 years in Seattle.
Yeah.
Sometimes you go back and in doing research for this team, like you are reminded of, first of all, between the 70s, 80s, and 90s, like players just stuck around longer. It was easier to resign.
Yeah, totally.
A lot of players, a lot of some of the Seahawks all-time greats played 10, 11, 12 seasons in Seattle. That just doesn't happen anymore, right? But yeah, Strong played, I think, 15 years. And even then, like, could have played longer if it wasn't for the neck injury. Probably would have.
Yeah. Probably would have played 3 or 4 more.
Yeah.
Because he was still a really good player. And he's just one of those guys that I know that most people don't remember. And that makes me sad because he was so much fun.
Yeah.
Especially for me, a part of it though is training camp. I liked going to camp when they were in Eastern Washington.
Yeah.
And you could walk up and you could literally stand on the sideline of drills because there's nobody else there. There wasn't
Like
the crowd
10,
of
20
thousands.
people there at a time.
Yeah, you had 10 to 15 people. And so you could literally just walk up and stand next to whoever is standing on the sideline and talk to them or whatever. And I remember watching some of these guys and, guys like Max Strong, just like quintessential Seahawk in my brain. He is to the Seahawks what Jay Buhner is to the Mariners, right? Just this guy that was never the superstar that outside of Seattle, but damn, does he just personify the city and the team?
So I've got a couple. I go way back. I mean, I saw the first game in the Kingdom, so my frame is a little wide compared to some fans, although there are plenty of fans that go way back. John Harris comes to mind as a guy that's underrated. Like, he was just a tackling machine and an interception, could play the ball better than almost any defensive back I ever saw. Like, he just had the instincts that were top notch, top end. And he was second fiddle on the defensive backs that were on the roster at the time, like Dave Brown. Yeah. Dave Brown was an amazing corner, and you never hear about Dave Brown anymore. It's just a crime. It really is. Time is undefeated. I mean, these guys get buried in the lines of history. And Dave Brown, if he was in the NFL today, would be a superstar. Just an interception machine. And a guy like, for me, lunch pail guys. Were just the definition of football when you were growing up, and you wanted to emulate those guys. Joe Nash comes to mind.
Yep.
Right, Joe Nash.
He got played a long time, and people
played a long time, and not only played a long time, played a long time for the Seahawks.
Yeah,
just a single team. Joe Nash, like, there was no other player that defined like lunch pail better than Joe Nash. He wasn't going to get any accolades. He played on a line with Jacob Green and a few other guys later on. And he just was a transcended time kind of a dude. Undersized, but just as feisty as you could possibly be at that position. And then another guy, opposite side of the ball, same sort of deal as Robbie Toback. Robbie Toback was just totally amazing as far as just being the standard bearer for lunch pail carriers in America. He wasn't going to go to any Pro Bowls or anything like that, but he was super steady year in, year out. A guy that you just plugged and played and didn't have to worry about anymore. We always kid on our show about long snappers never having to mention their name, like Chris Stoll's names. Like, you never really have to talk about him. We don't even do special team shows at all because what's the point? It's just steady as you go. And Crystal kind of defines that. It's like, you never have to mention his name. He's doing a great job.
I feel
Robbie
like
Toback was the same way.
What's unfortunate about long snappers is they need to have a stat. Like they don't, there's nothing to attach to them. Can't we with, I don't know, chips in the ball and all that? Can't we like at least come up with a stat of like accuracy of their snaps or something? Like these guys get no love because there's nothing to attach to their performance other than if they don't screw up, they're probably pretty good at their job.
Okay, so Dan, you've been really fresh in this topic, and you've got it currently going on for your show. What are your like top 3 guys that just come to mind to you?
So one that I discovered through the process of putting this together, and even in regards to an all-time team that I helped put together on the Hawks on Rundown podcast last week, I think you talk about forgotten guys and overlooked guys. John L. Williams. It's funny that, Keith brings up fullback.
Yeah. Yes,
because
totally.
what people don't understand about his era is he was a fullback. He was not there were times that he had to play tailback because of injuries or whatever. He was a fullback. He's in the top 10 all time receiving and rushing for the Seahawks.
Yeah, he was one of the best receivers out of the backfield I can remember.
And I just remember those plays. Though. He mostly played fullback.
He was a third down back in today's NFL, but he was in
today's NFL. He'd be more of like a hybrid, and I forget his dimensions.
He wasn't really a fullback that people think about.
He was a pretty good sized back. So he was like 5'11", 225 or something like that. He wasn't he wasn't overly huge.
5'11", 231.
Okay.
Yeah,
but
he was big. He was a fullback, but he also wasn't a fullback in that. Right. If you look at his usage, he wasn't a lead blocker. This wasn't a Max Strong / Michael Robinson type, lead blocker guy. He was a guy who caught the ball out of the backfield, picked up the blitz, ran the ball extremely well. Passes. Just like, God,
you look at his, So 546 catches in his career. This is just like the kind of the prime of his career. He went from his third year to about his 58 catches, 76 catches, 73 catches, 61 catches, 74 catches. Wow. Like I just remember that they used to run that screen.
He lead the team in receiving one of the years. I swear I remember him leading the team in receiving.
Might have been 89. He had 79 catches, 6 receiving touchdowns.
He insane that he would have that many.
He was such a good athlete for his size. Like he was so smooth. Made 2 Pro Bowls and was second in offensive rookie of the year.
So let me ask you,
he gets forgotten. Can you imagine the chaos, the revolt of a team taking a fullback in the first round? The way this went when the Seahawks took, because John L. Williams was a first round pick, if I remember right.
15th overall in the 1986 NFL draft out of Florida.
Yeah. Wow. Can you imagine
oh my
God, the pure riot that would happen if you took a fullback in the first round now?
So I have a question for you guys around the running back position. What do you guys think about Sean Alexander? Like, I can't quite figure out why not only the Seahawk fandom, but just in general, it's like you never hear about him. He really kind of leads the team in all-time stats on, rushing, touchdowns, etc. How do you view him? What do you think his place is as far as kind of a Hall of Fame candidate?
I think he's massively underrated by Seattle fans. Yes, he had a tendency to run out of bounds rather than take that hit, but that led to him having a lot of games played and not a lot of games missed. And you look at the 2005 season with 28 touchdowns on the ground and 29 overall. Of course, I'm doing that from memory, so that could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure those are the right numbers. Those are just crazy.
And won the MVP vote that year.
Yeah. Just absolutely crazy stats. And I was in Arizona in Tempe because they were playing at the University of Arizona Stadium. Then
Arizona State.
Yeah, or that's right, Arizona State, because the Glendale Stadium was under construction, and I saw him make a 95-yard touchdown run in person, and just like honestly, I don't think there's anything that I've seen that's similar in terms of just the ability to take the ball, have to like make people miss in the backfield, and then still take the ball 95 yards for a touchdown
and glide the way
yeah,
he
and just and make it look
Yeah.
so freaking easy.
Yeah, he was a fun guy to watch.
God, he was fun to watch. But I get that people, you know, you look at him and then you look at Marshawn, and Marshawn is universally loved because his ability to like
He was a warrior.
instigate contact and just bowl people over, and then the Beastquake run and all of that. You like, just think about that run. And there's a dichotomy there between Alexander's not wanting contact, wanting to bounce everything, and versus Marshawn. Marshawn's loved, and Alexander's kind of like not liked overall. And I think that's I think Sean Alexander is very much underrated by the Seattle fandom.
So a couple of comments coming in. I don't buy a lot of jerseys, but I still have Max Strong's. That's
Nice.
from Dave Esp.
Nice.
Right. Seahawkers podcast, maybe Brandon. Not sure, but one of those guys. Not many running backs who were ever as good as the inside the red zone guy as Sean. And then Misfit 74, I attended Sean Alexander's record-breaking game run at Husky Stadium versus the Raiders, 266 yards rushing, and I think 3 or 4 touchdowns, right?
I think I was
In
there
that
too.
game.
If I remember that game right, it was pouring rain.
I remember that game, and what I remember about that game is it felt like redemption. It took 10 years, but it felt like finally we were able to get the Raiders back for the Bo Jackson game, where it felt like he ran for 800 yards.
Now, I was at that Monday night game, the Bo Jackson game,
Oh God.
against the Raiders. So I was there sitting in row 7, section 135, seats 1, 2, and 3. And that was the season tickets at the time. And that guy,
Oh God.
that guy
I
was
always
amazing.
I always felt like Bo got a raw deal from that play. I mean, because Bo Jackson was so, and I mean, Brian Bosworth got a raw deal. Bo Jackson was such a force. He was so big and strong, and he was going full speed, and he was just an unbelievable force of nature. And Bosworth didn't hit him head on. He's coming from the side and trying to make that tackle. I don't think there's any linebacker in the league that would have stopped him short of the goal line on that play. I think it was just the hype and everything
Wrong
else.
place, wrong time.
Yeah.
You know, is there anybody, if he didn't have to deal with injuries and he could have played an
hip
additional
injury.
7, 8 years, 8 seasons in the NFL, would he
Bo?
have gone down as the greatest
Yes.
NFL player of all time?
Oh, I
Yes.
think he legit
Absolutely.
I believe he would have been a Hall of Fame player in 2 sports. I
Yeah.
really do.
If it
I
hadn't been
mean,
for that hip injury,
He was so gifted.
I think that absolutely he would be thought of as the best running back in NFL history over Jim Brown. And that says a lot because, I mean, Brown is got godlike status, amongst NFL fans. But Bo was so talented, so big, so fast, so powerful. If he hadn't had that injury, honestly, there's no one better. There absolutely is no one better.
And what a fluke thing. Just that hit had to be just right. The hip had to what a shame.
It didn't
So,
even
hey.
look like a bad tackle. It
No.
didn't even look like a thing.
No.
It just looked routine.
Yeah.
And boom, the end of one of the greatest careers of all time.
I did want to
So-
comment on the Alexander thing real quick. I do think
Yeah.
he gets a bum rap, and it's unfortunate because people, they remember the last thing they saw. And the last thing we saw was after he hurt his wrist, Sean Alexander shied away from contact. It affected him. It impacted him and changed him, not for the better. But his first couple of years in the league, especially when he was an MVP, even though, people want to discount him or discredit him because of that offensive line that he operated behind, do you take away from Emmitt Smith, all-time leading rusher in the NFL? How many Hall of Famers did he run behind? Right? How many great offensive lines did they have? It was kind of the backbone of that team. He wasn't that way his first couple of years in the league. He would lower his shoulder, and he was bigger than people remember, and he would run you over and make contact, especially as, Seahawkers, whoever that is. Shout out to Clinton or Adam or Brandon. Once he got a nose for the end zone, he was almost unstoppable. He did change as a player.
He did too. I mean, he just took it to another level. Like he had another gear, like some other juke motion quantum thing going on. When he touched the ball inside.
You can't just say he had a great offensive line and not give him any credit for that. Part of being a great running back is sensing the crease, right? And knowing where to go. It's one of the things that I still question about Kenneth Walker. There are sometimes that there's a hole in a crease there and he ignores it and cuts another way. It's you can't just, take all the credit away from the running back. But when it comes to the question of the Hall of Fame, this came up on another live stream I was watching yesterday. It's tricky. It's I just pulled up the numbers. Well, let me ask you this. Is Ezekiel Elliott a Hall of Famer?
No.
Okay. Because
Ezekiel Elliott is a nice name.
Had a couple of huge years,
Cowboys, which helps.
Not the longevity, right?
But statistically, he had 2 good years, and the rest was kind of mediocre.
Let me ask you this: if Derrick Henry retired today, is he a Hall of Famer?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Okay. Derrick Henry has 9,502 yards rushing in his career over a 7-year career.
I think in
8 years, Sean Alexander ran for 94.53.
It comes down to what kind of impact did you have on your team and on the game and getting into the playoffs. And after you were in the playoffs, what kind of damage did you do? It's hard to make the case for either one of those guys. If those are the criteria. Now, if you're just standalone running back and you're looking at stats,
Sean's 8th all time.
Yeah.
So this is why I think
definitely
Sean
has got to be in the conversation.
I think Sean deserves to get in. I think Ezekiel
Elliott. If maybe he's one of those guys at the Veterans Committee, like later on after his eligibility runs out.
Yeah.
It's tough. Running back.
Question for you guys. How you guys doing on beer?
Halfway through myself.
I only have a little bit left of number 2.
All right.
I'm
so
ready for number 3 if you want to do it.
In 5 minutes, we're gonna pour another one.
I'm cool with that.
All right. So I got a follow-up question on running backs as a whole. Keith, this is for you. Looking ahead, crystal ball. Who will have a better career in Seattle? Ken Walker, III, or Zach Charbonnet?
Ooh, I'm going to go with Ken Walker III simply because he's had a better career so far. Given the chance of both of them healthy last year, it was Walker that was the starter, the more productive player and all of that. And I'm going to lean on that. But man, that is not the greatest. I don't feel great about that choice.
Ken Walker can do more with less. So having an inferior offensive line is not such a detriment to Ken Walker as it would be to Zach. And that proved out last year, I think.
Yeah. I mean, his speed is something that Charbonnet doesn't have.
Yeah.
But Charbonnet's power, I think, has the ability to be kind of a difference maker for him. The ability to take a 3-yard run and turn it into a 5-yard run regularly, given a semi-competent offensive line, which he did not have last year. I think there's a lot to be said about that.
It's a fascinating question because my first inclination was to agree with you, Keith. I just think Ken Walker has more dynamic qualities, and he can hit the home run at any time. Like he's one of those guys. He's like a home run hitter in baseball. Like any time he can knock it out of the park.
Mm-hmm.
But and I do like that they seem to be there's some messaging this offseason around their desire to get him more involved in the passing game, which is something I've been screaming about for the last couple of years. Like it doesn't even have to be an exotically designed screenplay. Just use him as check.
And Ryan Grubb's going to do
the ball to him in space.
That's just part of his MO.
But then as I was listening to you talk, I'm thinking, okay, let's look at it from a business standpoint though. Ken Walker's going into his 3rd season. right? He'll be eligible. Next 2025 will be the last year of his deal. You know, who knows where running back contracts are going to be by then, probably kind of settled into where they are now. Zach Charbonnet is a year, not necessarily younger, but contract wise, like, does Charbonnet maybe in a weird way have a better opportunity to be here long term than Ken
Almost
Walker?
like the Sam Hell question,
Right? Like he can be a complementary
Mhm.
piece for the next couple of years. They don't want to pay Walker market value. They give that money to Charbonnet instead. It's not as big a contract because he's the second guy, and then he gets a second contract. Like there's a world where Zach Charbonnet becomes a longer term fixture.
This is why we pay you the big bucks, Dan. Really, this is it right here.
No, I think it's a really good point that like Walker is the better player. I think that is
He's more dynamic for sure.
Who gets the second contract? You can't sign them both to second.
You can't sign them both to a second deal. So which one do you give the money to?
Yeah, because if you give the money to Walker, Charbonnet is going to want to walk.
Yep.
He's going to want to look for an opportunity to start.
But
somewhere.
I think that the way it works out, because Charbonnet will be cheaper, he's more likely to get the second contract, and therefore more likely to have the longer contract, the longer Seattle tenure, and
who knows?
The bigger overall impact.
2 years from now, the Seahawks could be playing with a quarterback on a rookie contract, and you can afford to keep them both, you know, or you can pay Walker, which because paying a running back nowadays, you know, is only what the Ramondre Stevenson deal. That's kind of the baseline, right?
So based on the intellect that was just displayed in that answer, I have a follow-up question that is amazing. If Bill, Keith, and Dan were handed the keys to the Seahawks car, based on our collective years of experience and deep dive of scouting, drafting, and roster building, we've been at this for a while.
Yeah.
Do you think we could build a successful franchise?
The three of us?
As a group, yeah.
Egotistically, I want to say yes, because I have...
Yeah, right?
I've done the scouting thing, especially around the draft, for long enough to know that my success rate is pretty damn high when compared to, you know, NFL. But at the same time, honestly, nah. I'm not egotistical enough to know or to think that I know better than guys like Schneider. I don't. I just straight up don't.
And it's more than just football.
I like that.
Football operations, quote unquote, is a big thing. Like it's a lot of business acumen, a lot of personnel stuff. You know, it just goes on and on.
So that's my take. I think the end answer is no. But honestly, like there's part of me that wants to say yes because, yeah, I've got an ego a little bit, and two, because I've got a pretty good track record. You look at my shadow drafts that I do every year, which I don't think we actually did a show on this year, which is interesting, Bill. But my shadow drafts that I do every year, my shadow drafts tend to be really good. They tend to be like maybe in the 6th and 7th round, I fail, but the first 5 rounds, I've got a really high hit rate. And I like to think that I could probably manage.
And it's not just you in a silo. It would be a group's thing, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's to me where, so if I was to answer my own question, that's where I would have the confidence. Like the combination of experience, the combination of business stuff that I've done, the combination of deep dive scouting and mock drafts and all that stuff. I mean, you just in it for so long, you build that knowledge base, and I think combined together, I think we could do, you know, a pretty decent job, and we could learn the rest. But you're right though, Keith, you got to have an ego to be able to say I could do it.
Yeah.
And you know, for a while though, you know, if I'm being completely honest, I always thought that maybe I could somehow figure out a way to get a front office job somewhere where I could get in and then start to work towards that and be maybe an assistant GM at some point, and, you know, but obviously that's not going to happen. We do this show, it's for fun, you know, all that, but it would be it's an interesting exercise.
Well, I'll take that. Let's do this, Bill. So just you and I have been doing this for 8 years. Given the idea of my scouting reports versus results on NFL quarterbacks and offensive line, how would you rate me versus NFL GMs?
That's so hard. That's so hard because when we do mocks and we talk about these things and we look at players and evaluate and then they turn out or they don't, whether it's on the Seahawks team or another team, it's hard because you're judging that in a silo based on the idea that there's not 31 other teams competing for the same situation at the same time. And so it's hard to evaluate that process because it's just like every other mock draft out there or writer out there that's not an actual GM that is going through that process with a group of people, scouts, area scouts, that are having to compete for that pick with 31 other teams. And I think that dynamic gets lost a lot of times. But yes, just looking at players and evaluating. Yeah. I mean, you, if you've been at it for a while, you identify and you and Dan as well. And even myself, you end up identifying the players that are really good players and would fit on any team, your team, other teams, et cetera. And they tend to pan out pretty good. But like I said, there's 31 other teams. You're one team. You might be lucky to grab one player that we've mocked over and over and over again that ends up having an opportunity to be on your team. So it's hard that way.
Yeah,
I've always thought if a genie came down and said, getting 3 wishes or whatever, you can change whatever you want to change, or maybe I get reincarnated or can be sent back in time to do it over again. Like NFL GM would be my dream job. Like, I think that's just how my brain works. And it's the way I see things. And it's kind of my approach to doing the channel, it's like, whereas
Agreed.
fans just react to every single move or rumor or report or change just based on what is in front of them and what they like and what they think they want. I try to think about things more in terms of, well, what if? Like maybe we're not looking at the big picture here. Maybe I don't like this particular trade proposal on its surface, but why does it make sense? Why would it make sense for them? And I think that helps me to arrive sometimes at some more balanced conclusions. Whereas a lot of fans they're just, it's all emotion. And I used to be this way. I used to be that guy that's all I thought about is what I wanted. That's my favorite player. And I don't care if he's declined. I want him around until he can't walk anymore. Right. But I do think people underestimate the full scope of that job and what it entails. And it's amazing to me that these guys ever have any social life or that they ever get to relax. Cause I mean, it's like,
oh, no kidding. It's 24/7, 365. That's it.
Right. Like I've always just been, I want to hold an NFL GM's phone in my hand for like 2 minutes someday. Just see how many notifications come in.
We're going to pour our third and final.
Oof. And I got to go grab mine. It's in the,
okay.
I got it in the fridge. Hold
on. Okay. So Dan's heading off to get his out of the fridge. And I have gone with my third. This one is a double barrel maple pecan.
What?
Smoked porter.
Wow.
So it's been aged twice in bourbon barrels. It's a maple pecan smoked porter. I've had, oh my God, this is like, and it's from Freem, and it's one of their like one-offs that you could only get if you're part of their like club situation, which I was for a couple of years. And before I decided to let that lapse, I got a whole bunch of these and other ones. And I'm just going to say it. This shit's good.
So I'm going to say this. So Keith is amazing at this. So I don't have the I'll just say it. I don't have the guts to walk into a beer store, and mine locally is Total Wine here in Phoenix, where there's dozens and dozens, hundreds of choices for single options, single beers or six packs or whatever. But to choose that beer requires a certain elevated level of competence in beerdom that I just do not have. So I want to pause.
Now I need
everybody.
to know what Keith is drinking. What do you,
Right.
Okay,
So I want to
you got some
pause everybody.
moonshine
Hold
over
on.
there?
That Keith is a kind of a homebrew specialist. He's he's got this thing, right? That he's this knowledge base that I just don't possess. Now Dan works in an industry where it's his job to kind of know about general specific, things about every beer and every drink that ever existed, right? But Keith has got this hands-on approach that I admire. So yeah, tell Dan what you've got going on.
So this is a double barrel maple pecan smoked porter. So it's been aged twice in two different barrels. It's a maple pecan smoked porter before that. And
just so you know, Keith, right in since you've been talking about this beer, we've gained 10 listeners on the show live. And you're holding them. The content is like engaging, and you've got them.
This is
Keep
11%. This is 11%, which makes it the middle of my 3 beers, unfortunately, because I've been 10.5, 11.5, and now 11. But this one, the double
Keith's
pecan
had
maple
3 beers for every
porter.
beer that we've been having, Dan. Like, this is not even a contest anymore.
I'm definitely not gonna go to the gym today. Like, that is out. I'm too
honestly.
I
will say this. Those people who are watching this on YouTube saw me like drop off, and it was just 2 people on the screen for a second because I had to run to the bathroom. Yeah, running to the bathroom was a it was definitely a challenge. It was a challenge to run and not fall down.
Bill, did I miss your beer? What are you having?
Bill?
I've got an AleSmith Brewing Company small batch My Bloody Valentine Hoppy Red Ale. And I didn't look this beer up, and I don't know anything about it. And I know this was supposed to be our favorites, but it's an hoppy red ale. So it's kind of right in my wheelhouse as far as what I really kind of like and pull off the shelf when I do experiment. And so I'm going to pour it now and look at it. It's really nice. Amber, totally
So
red.
when you say hoppy red ale, what comes to mind is Kilt Lifter by Pike Brewing there in Seattle.
When I think of a red ale, I think of Men's Room Red from Elysian.
Oh, yeah.
That's another beer up here for a long time.
One.
It was a
really good one.
It was attached to a radio show on KSW.
Both of those are really good. But yeah.
Nice.
What do you think, Bill?
No, it's good. It's a little bitter on the tail end, but it's my 3rd beer, so I'm ready for that now, and it's a good taste.
So I know you said favorites. I didn't have time to go, seek out my all-time favorites, but I wanted to grab a beer I'd never had before, and so this is the Elysian Juice Dust Juicy IPA.
Yes,
yes,
I've had that.
8.2% ABV, so I'm stepping it up.
This is the one I didn't pull
IBUs.
out. Drake's Juicy. I might get to that later.
Malts are pale, rolled oats and honey. Hops are Chinook, Citra, and Amarillo. Tasting notes: orange, guava, ripe tropical fruit, and candied citrus.
You're going to like that one.
I like the color already.
Okay, so
I have a question for you guys.
Go ahead.
For what I have a non-football question for you, and I've been inspired by this. Are either of you guys, do you do much with TikTok at all?
I don't do anything with TikTok entirely because my other persona besides being a football person is that of a teacher, and my students are all on TikTok, and therefore I avoid it because I don't want to be in that same space as my students. And it's bad enough that I'm on Instagram. So, yeah.
So I've only got one thing to say.
Uh-huh.
Look at me. I'm not on TikTok.
Look at me. I'm 58 years old and I'm on TikTok. So
All right. I'm 50. I got you beat by 1 year. I'm 59. But I will say this.
Dan,
I know about
Dan,
TikTok.
did you just say you were 58?
I'll be 59 in October. I'll be.
That is,
all right.
God damn, I don't believe you. If you, like, you being older than me seems absolutely crazy. I am 46. I will be 47 in December, and I cannot believe you are older than I am.
I tell you, for the longest time, I never felt it and took a lot of pride in the fact that nobody ever thought I was my age. But now, like, I feel almost 60.
I decided to grow
Man.
this out a little bit.
My
That's the end
beautiful partner reminds me every day that I'm becoming more of a cranky old man with each passing hour.
Hey, how about some non-football questions?
Oh, so I was inspired by TikTok for this because there's a trend right now where there's a filter where you do blind ratings 1 through 10 in all these food categories, best fast food restaurants, best, all that. And so I would like to know, my question for all three of us would be, what's the best, and I know there's some regional differences here, best fast food burger?
Shake Shack.
Hop Daddy.
See, Hop Daddy is something I've never heard of. Is that a chain? Is that local?
It is a chain, and I'm not sure.
Because you're in Phoenix, right?
Yeah.
Just so everybody knows, Keith is in Vancouver, Washington.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in Seattle.
Shake Shack just opened for the first time in Portland.
We got Shake Shack here as well.
Right next to Powell's in downtown.
Interesting, they came to Seattle before Portland. We got ours during the pandemic.
But honestly, I've been to Shake Shack twice, and yeah, there's just nothing comparable. I mean, okay, In-N-Out's great. I went to that when I was in Phoenix back when I was going to Mariner spring training. I absolutely understand the love of In-N-Out, but Shake Shack's something different, and to me that was great.
So I'm gonna have to take back Hop Daddy a little bit. They've only got 2 locations. I thought it was a little bit bigger than that.
All right. So of the bigger type chains that we all might know, what would your next go-to be?
I really like Culver's. I don't know if
I've
you
been
guys are
hearing a lot
familiar
about them lately.
with Culver's, but and I'm
Are
not
they
sure
the
that
ones
they're in the Northwest.
They do the frozen custard. That's kind of what they're known for,
yeah,
too,
they're
right?
kind of like what's the burger chain at Burgerville? It's kind of like Burgerville, only it's kind of like Burgerville, but maybe slightly more
Isn't
elevated
Burgerville
with a
only
little bit more choice.
Vancouver, Portland?
Yes.
And not anywhere else?
But I'm just trying to
Okay.
say that it's kind of like that people might be familiar with in the Northwest, whether in Portland or Seattle, but it's pretty decent.
It's interesting. I've only had Shake Shack twice. Once was in Vegas, and then another time I ordered it on DoorDash, and that doesn't count because by the time it gets to you, it's lukewarm, and you can't really judge it. I can't remember being blown away by it, but it was also kind of a crazy night, and I might have been a little drunk and maybe didn't enjoy it fully. I would have, up until last year, I would have said In-N-Out, because every time I've had In-N-Out in California or Arizona, I was always struck by how the burger was so hot and fresh by the time you got your hands on it that I would have to wait to take a bite because it would literally burn my mouth. And that
the burgers are good
to me.
But the French fries there are
God,
are
the
not
fries
good.
are crap.
Yeah.
The fries are crap.
Fresh
And
cut
the thing
fries
is-
are so hard to do, and they don't do it right. You have to cook them twice, and they don't.
Yeah.
But the
So-
last time I was in Arizona for spring training last year, I was thoroughly underwhelmed by the burger that I got, and it's changed my opinion of theirs.
Wow,
a little
that's
bit. It's changed
disappointing.
a little bit. Yeah, I would say when I think about, and it's tough because what's fast food versus fast casual, right? Like I don't count. I saw something the other day where somebody was talking about Five Guys. I think Five Guys makes a great burger. I don't count that as fast food. If you don't have a drive-up window,
Yeah. Five
Are you
Guys
really
is
fast
pretty
food,
good,
right?
but they're not. But they're fast cash.
I'll throw
I
a
agree with you
curveball
on
at
that.
you. I'll throw a curveball. If I'm my go-to, if I just want to go to just a massive chain burger place at any given point and grab a burger,
Massive chain. Is that the criteria? Massive chain.
or just recognizable chain. How about that? I'm getting a sourdough jack.
Okay, that is an underrated
Right?
burger.
Usually I like lettuce and pickles and all the veggies on my burger, but that burger, every single time I think I've had one, no matter what Jack in the Box I've been to in the country, tastes exactly the same.
Yep.
It's juicy, the tomato, the cheese.
Yeah.
You
That
can
is
eat
an
it in the
underrated
car
burger.
because it doesn't all end up on your shirt. Like it's
I like a
sourdough.
Wendy's
It's one
double.
slice of tomato and it's boom, done.
Dave's
And that is an underrated burger.
Yeah, sourdough Jack.
Interesting. Okay, so let's get wild and crazy. How about that, right?
All right.
Okay. Who wants to take this wild and crazy question?
Ooh, this is delicious, by the way. Okay, I'll take a wild and crazy question.
Sure. Okay. So here we go.
Just to be
And then I have
honest about Garner, I'm having a very difficult time keeping my eyes focused on the screen as we talk.
Well, you're next. I better ask you the next question right after this. Okay. Do you believe the Earth? This is for Dan. Do you believe the Earth is being visited or is currently being occupied by a non-human intelligence with technology that might be superior to that of humans?
I thought you were going to ask if I thought it was flat, but then that would have probably qualified as our politics non-negotiable. Do I think aliens have visited and are here now? Is that basically
not aliens? No, it doesn't have to be aliens, but non-human intelligence. Like when you say aliens, you think of little green men. I don't want to give that overall connotation. Non-human intelligence, like you've seen kind of the videos, the TikTok videos of the Air Force and Navy pilots describing certain things that are credible, that can't be either dismissed or identified.
I guess I have two answers to that. Number one is from the moment I was born, like I was fascinated with space and just the vast, limitless, endless nature of space. And I would be one of those, cliche kids that would sit out with my buddy, camping out, looking up at the stars and just going, oh, how can space never end? Like just that concept, right? For us to think that we're the only tiny little rock in this entire endless, limitless universe that just happens to be far enough away from a sustainable star and energy source to have life on that planet, and that life is intelligent and can create technology is ridiculous, right? We're not alone. We're not. And I do think there's some compelling evidence. Some of it comes from the U.S. government themselves. A few years ago, I still laugh at the bit that Nate Bargatze did on one of his specials during the pandemic when he's like, the government came out and told us aliens are real last year. Nobody paid any attention to it. Like nobody cares. But I don't think they're like here among us or any other non-human intelligent life because we would catch them. It's why, like, I grew up thinking Bigfoot was real and the Bermuda Triangle and Noah's Ark and all these like things. But everybody has a cell phone now and we occupy every inch of the planet.
What if there's a parallel?
Nothing goes unguarded.
What if there's a parallel timeline sort of situation where you're kind of like they come in and out of our perception? If you think about it, I'm trying to be serious but also playful.
I've considered all of these questions.
If humans only have a certain spectrum,
right,
of both sonically and visually that we can perceive, and is there a potential or possibility that things could be interacting in our world that we just can't quite see or perceive?
I've certainly considered it because I have had some deja vus in my life that I just cannot wrap my head around, that were so vivid that I knew I had lived this moment before. Right. And so you have to consider some of those things. I just think I'll just go back to my answer. In this day and age, it would nearly be impossible for some of that to go undetected, which I just had this debate with somebody. Well, it wasn't a debate because I won, but the whole flat earth thing, just fly. Okay. Get in an airplane and go take a picture of the edge of the earth. And then I'll believe it. And they have some bullshit answer for that makes no sense at all. And I'm like, okay, then we're done. Like I believe there's intelligent life out there that's non-human. I tend to believe maybe 60-40. They've been here before. There's some really compelling historical evidence that something happened a long time ago that seems way advanced, and there's evidence of it. But yeah, here now among us, I don't know. Unless my cat is more intelligent than I think he is.
Which is more frightening? That we are alone in the universe or that we're not?
I think are.
I think that we are. The fact that the trillions and trillions and trillions of galaxies that we've seen, each having trillions of stars, and that any number of them could have planets. The fact that we are the only place in all of the existence that would have intelligent life.
You're talking about a situation though where we have all of our timelines are lined up, and travel is, let's just say,
I don't even care about. I'm not talking about travel. I'm just talking about, you look at all of the fact that we took the Hubble Space Telescope and we aimed it at the darkest point of space, and we left it there for looking at it with the aperture open for a long time, and realized that it and that was the darkest point of space. That was the one point where there looked like there was the most nothing, and it was full of thousands or millions of galaxies, each with trillions and trillions of stars. The idea that we are the only place where intelligent life has existed seems astronomically impossible. Does that mean they've traveled and they've been here? I don't know. Yeah, there's compelling evidence to say they have. At the same time, there's also compelling evidence to say that it's impossible for them to have been here.
Yeah.
Given the physics,
unless wormholes exist or whatever. So, yeah. Okay. So back to football. Dan.
Bill, back to football.
So looking ahead to the end of the season, who will lead the team in sacks and pressures?
Ooh, I think it's Leonard Williams. I think they've invested so much in him.
Wow.
I think they've invested so much in him to make him a focal point, a foundation of that defensive line, that I think, no matter how much development we see from some of the other young players in the front 4 or 5, front 7, that he's going to be the benefactor of that, and that he's going to be the guy that they're going to put into position. As much as I, raved about Byron Murphy earlier, I think Leonard Williams is in some ways their Justin Madubuike, where he's the guy that they're trying to maximize his matchups.
Do you think that he's going to have more sacks, more pressures than Byron Murphy?
I do. I don't think it's going to be a massive number. I don't think anyone on this team is going to, or maybe is even capable of, double-digit sacks, but I could see Leonard having a 9 or 10 sack season, or a bunch of other guys get 7 and 8. Maybe those outside guys, but I really think that the things that Mike McDonald wants to do with this defense to confuse offenses, so you don't ever know where a guy's coming from.
What position do you think that he gets those from the most?
He said he's playing 6 spots right now.
But is he going to be? Is that pressure going to come more from the 3 tech spot or the 5 tech?
I could see it coming from the 5 tech, because teams are going to have to account for Byron Murphy. And you talked earlier about how he might create things for others, especially his rookie year, in those times that he gets in there. I think he's going to be such a force, and he's going to take so much attention away with his dynamic movement skills on the interior. I think Leonard Williams is going to be the biggest benefactor of that, and is going to get some sacks, or we're going to go, well, Byron Murphy made that happen.
So Dan, let me ask you a question. Because people keep comparing Byron Murphy to Aaron Donald, and I think I don't agree that is that is the best example of a comp. I have been, since pre-draft, comparing him not to Aaron Donald, but instead to Warren Sapp. What would
Oh,
you
I like
respond to
that.
that?
Another kind of undersized guy. Yeah, I just think any comparison to Aaron Donald is ridiculous. I don't care how close you are
Thank you.
in physical stature, height, weight, measurements, even combine testing. Like, he was just such a unique player that
Yeah.
I think it's unfair to compare anyone to that. I've heard Grady Jarrett. But yeah, I think Warren Sapp's a good one because, again, that strong low base, right? Just that combination of strength at the point of attack and foundation, and also quickness and hand usage.
Is this player anywhere in the same orbit or similar to Cortez Kennedy, Keith? I know that was one of your favorite players, and I watched him certainly, but I just forget.
What did Cortez weigh though? He was quite a bit bigger, wasn't he?
Cortez Kennedy was like 305. He was a bigger guy.
But man, he was all lower half.
But
the thing about Cortez Kennedy was that he existed in an era in which interior defensive tackles living in the backfield as pass rushers and getting 10 sacks was absolutely unheard of. And yet that's what he did. That's why he's a Hall of Famer. He's literally he was a transcendent player in that he changed the way we viewed a defensive tackle.
Yeah, that's true. He's one of my top 3 players of all time with the Seahawks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's been a lot of, I don't know if we want to get into this or not, but there's been a lot of, just because it's the kind of the time of year, it sort of lends itself to this, but a lot of Mount Rushmore talk lately. Well, and it's because the NFL came out and did it too. I think that spurred a lot of this on. But do we want to talk about that? Like, who would your guys' Mount Rushmore of Seahawks be?
I mean, that's pretty easy. I mean, you start with Steve Largent, and then you go with Cortez Kennedy and Walter Jones, and there's your 3 out of your 4, and they're all Hall of Famers. And then who's your 4th?
That's kind of where the debate comes into, because a lot of people.
The only debate shows up is what do you do with number 4? And there's some pretty good options there.
I mean, you gotta consider. Yeah, you're right, Keith. Go ahead.
I was going to straight up and say Richard Sherman, because absolute first ballot Hall of Famer, face of the franchise kind of guy, and just dominant in a way that was different than the way other players were dominant.
He changed the position.
He really did. I mean, the position went from they're looking for guys that were 5'10" and shifty to guys that were 6'1", 6'2", and could run, because he was 6'4".
Nobody talked about arm
Richard
length
Sherman changed the position.
Came along.
Yeah. I mean, he was elite in ways that no one ever envisioned a cornerback being elite. So to me, he's my 4th. But there's plenty of other guys. I mean,
a lot of people want to put Russ on there. Bobby's a tough one to.
Bobby Wagner, Russell Wilson, Sean Alexander, Marshawn
Jacob
Lynch.
Green had over 100
Jacob
sacks.
Green is a great one too. There's so many different guys. Kenny Easley is a guy that absolutely deserves.
If he'd played 5 more years, it'd be our Mount Rushmore would be the easiest.
Yeah. I mean, and Earl Thomas,
but
even, right?
Kenny Easley,
5 more years in a Seahawk uniform, Earl Thomas would be a Hall of Famer.
And Kenny Easley, 5 more years, he was denied those 5 years because of the NFL's, at the time, they were handing out anti-inflammatories, NSAIDs like candy, and they just destroyed his kidneys. Yeah. And literally, they destroyed.
I think about that every time I take ibuprofen.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm like, maybe I should only take 2.
So let me ask you this, guys. What do you think about Cam Chancellor in this conversation?
God, Cam Chancellor to me shows up as the number 5 or 6 guy, but he's absolutely up there, more so than
you mentioned Earl Thomas. A position.
Yeah, you mentioned Earl Thomas. To me, Cam Chancellor fits before Earl Thomas because of his leadership, because of his ownership of that spot on the team, where he was not just the enforcer for other teams
But
come
he
across
was
the middle.
he was a
But
great
he was the enforcer of keeping guys in line, and you have a responsibility to your teammates, and we are going to hold you to that. That is what Cam Chancellor represented.
That's
Yeah.
what we've needed for
Absolutely.
the last
I would submit
9 years.
he set the tone for that Super Bowl 48 with that hit on Demaryius
Mhm.
Thomas.
Oh
on
my
the
goodness.
third play of the game, I think. I think he changed Vernon Davis's career. Like, I do.
Oh, yes. And Vernon Davis retired
I don't think
early
he was ever
after
the same.
7 seasons.
Yeah.
Vernon Davis retired after 7 seasons, I think, off my memory. But, right? He, there was a trajectory.
One of the great athletes to ever play the tight end position. Just
and
full on
it changed
athlete.
that
He was
day.
never the same.
When you saw the all of the sweat in slow motion fly off his body.
Yeah.
You know the picture I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
That moment where it was flagged for an illegal hit was proven in slow motion to not be, was so violent that I didn't even mind the flag, because it was like it literally ruined a human being. And no disrespect, intended at all for this, but Vernon Davis was never, ever the same after that. Timid, he had ghosts. He saw ghosts, dude. And I would have too.
One of the most compelling conversations that we had doing that all-time team last week was that, if you break it down to free safety, strong safety, like he's not the best strong safety in Seahawks history, because it's Kenny Easley. Like, that's how good Kenny Easley was.
Yeah.
But yet it was so different. But this is what a freak Kenny Easley was. He technically played strong safety on those teams. John Harris was the free safety. And yet in a 2-year span, Kenny Easley had 7 picks and 10 picks and won Defensive Player of the Year. He had 17 interceptions in 2 years from the strong safety position. He was just as capable of covering as he was of coming up and laying the lumber. And it's like, that's how good Kenny Easley was, that Cam Chancellor, one of the great strong safeties in this league's history, is the second best one we've had.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Absolutely.
But it's close. It's close because of the longevity, and sadly, both of their careers ended early.
Well, the fact that Ronnie Lott, of all people, came out and said that Kenny Easley was the best strong safety he's ever seen play and deserved to be in the Hall of Fame. Ronnie freaking Lott was the one campaigning for Kenny Easley to get into the Hall of Fame.
Can we
I've
talk
had Paul
about
Moyer on the
something
show, and he says Kenny Easley's the best football player he's ever played with, period.
So can we talk about something that we hardly ever talk about, which is, and we don't go very much past Pete Carroll and Mike Holmgren in the coaching history of the Seahawks very often. But I think, you talk about Chuck Knox coming into this team and coach these guys that we're talking about, and giving the Seahawks their relevance for the very first time as a franchise. And all three of us, I think, were around. Well, you started your fandom, Keith, when Chuck Knox was the coach, correct?
It's true. I was young. I was only like 7 or 8, but that 84 season when Kurt Warner got hurt and they had to go air Chuck instead of ground Chuck. That was the year in which I became a Seahawk fan. I did not know what I was watching, but it was fun, and I would never look back. That was the year. So Chuck Knox has a lot to do with.
They went 13-4 with no Kurt Warner.
And the year before was the most fantastic finish to a playoff game I'd ever seen in my life, where Largent caught that pass at the end of that game from.
Was it the Miami game?
Yes, the Miami game in Miami against Dan Marino and Dan, not Dan, David Craig.
Dave, yep.
Was the quarterback, succeeded Jim Zorn and made that desperate throw at the end where in true Largent form, spun him around and was wide open, and put that team in a position to win that game. And when we won, and the the exhilaration. I mean, this was all on TV at the time because we just didn't travel at that point, for games and so forth.
Right.
And we didn't have any history as a franchise. We didn't have any success. This was the first time we were like tasting any success at all, and we won that. And I just remember the feeling was very similar to that first game we won against the Panthers to get into the first Super Bowl, where
2005.
Where you just felt this like overwhelming sense of pride and all the effort you put in with Bill the Beer Man, trying to get the crowd going right at the home games, and all the energy and all the things, and you willed this team from nothing, like Jack Patera, nothing, to a winning franchise was just the greatest feeling ever as a fan. To kind of grow up with that and then finally taste that success. That's why I always like Chuck Knox, man, because he brought that gravitas to the franchise that we'd never had before then.
It's so fun
Go ahead.
It's so fun to look back and see, kind of give some context to what actually was happening back there and try and reconcile it with what your memory is, and also see how the game has changed, right? So Kurt Warner has the dynamic rookie season, right? Looks like he's on his way to Hall of Fame career. He can do anything. You just hand him the ball and he goes, right? Strength, power, quickness, all of those things would have gone down, I think, if he hadn't gotten hurt as one of the great running backs of all time. But medicine wasn't then what it is now. And that ACL injury, he was never the same.
Well, and the Seattle, the kingdom of just a very thin layer of AstroTurf on concrete.
On top, yeah, it was terrible.
Jesus
Absolutely
Christ,
terrible.
I can't believe they played football.
I played on that field.
God, that's crap.
And yeah, it was not good.
So then they changed the offense. Basically, they lean on Dave Craig, his first full year as a starter. So he throws for this is crazy. Like he throws for 3,671 yards in 84 and 85. He followed it up with 3,600. Again, that would be nothing by today's standards.
Yeah,
but,
in that era.
But yeah, right. In 84,
back in that era, they were huge. Those are massive numbers.
32 touchdowns in 84 and 27 touchdowns in 85. So 59 total touchdowns over 2 seasons. Can either of you tell me how many interceptions he threw over those same 2 seasons? I was
going to ask that question. How many interceptions did he have? Or how many fumbles did he have?
Fumbles.
44.
How many fumbles did he have?
44 interceptions. Think about that. You would have been benched.
In 84, they won 13 games, and he threw 24 picks to 32 touchdowns. We're so hyper-focused now on interceptions that, I don't know. Like, there are people that think Sam Howell
probably dropped the ball because he threw 17 that year, too.
Right? Like,
yeah.
It's insane. He threw 261 touchdowns in his career to 199 interceptions, and he was the all-time leader in fumbles in the NFL.
Yeah.
Is he still
an all-time leader in fumbles? All-time
is he still lead in that?
I believe he. Yeah,
he's top 10 in a lot of different categories. If you go look at him, like
honestly, I don't think Dave Craig's fumble stat, I don't believe his record. I don't believe will ever be broken.
Okay, here we go.
It's one of those had 8-inch hands.
Wait,
like Kenny
nope,
Pickett.
It has been broken.
It has.
He is currently third with 153 fumbles in the NFL, and the top 2. Any guesses? One stopped playing in 2000, and one stopped playing in 2010, and the one that stopped playing in 2000 is also a former Seahawk. I would have never gotten either of these on a trivia.
Jerry Rice.
Warren Moon,
number 2, 161 fumbles in his career, but number 1 with 166 fumbles, granted over an almost 1991 to 2010. So almost a 20-year career.
Dave Craig played for 20 years.
So, but Brett Favre.
Brett Favre
has one.
I knew Brett Favre was up there as far as total turnovers. I did not realize it was that number of fumbles. Because with Craig, it was definitely like, it felt like that record was never going to be broken because that the NFL had changed and that turnovers were such a big deal and that teams would not accept that level of fumbles and turnovers.
But think about this dude. Think about this dude. Mudbone. Like he's amazing. Like when you really think about him, like his place in Seahawks lore, it's like he came in after Jim Zorn. Nobody at the time, nobody thought anybody could replace Jim Zorn because Jim Zorn was everyone's fan favorite. He was good
Right.
looking. He was, and then here comes this kid from Milton College, right? That is like a total underdog. And he comes in, he wins the job, and Chuck Knox wasn't going to hand that job, without reason. Won that job, and he just he was one of those guys that had definite shortcomings, and he pissed you off a lot. You mentioned the interceptions. Like you would be driving, and he would throw the ball at the most inopportune time to kill drives, etc. But somehow, and we had this defense, right? Where you had John Harris and all those guys, those defensive backs were just tremendous. The linebacking group was tremendous in that defense. And somehow or another, he willed that team to win. It's like he kind of he was the first quarterback I saw as a kid growing up that put a team, other than like Fran Tarkington. And I know I date myself, I go way back. But that put a team on his back and kind of just willed them to win, and that was him. And so I got to give him some props for that.
He's the kind of quarterback that he would never even be given an opportunity in today's NFL because he wasn't big enough, strong enough. He didn't have a strong enough arm. He didn't throw a tight spiral, right? Like a bunch of different arm angles, wobbly ball. He was just kind of a backyard sort of. He's just the guy that made plays.
But he inherited Steve Largent.
Yeah, that helps. He's 30. Wait. He is currently he's 27th all time in NFL history in passing yards.
Yeah.
With like 44,000 or 48,000.
Coming from an era where
38.
Coming from an era where teams were running the ball, like passing yards did not matter. They did not equate to NFL wins. Yeah. And yet he's still 27th overall, ever.
Yeah.
Which is nuts.
Yeah.
And like Seahawkers podcast just said, I think he was top 10 when he retired.
He's ahead of guys like, this is fun. He's ahead of Boomer Esiason, Donovan McNabb, Jim Kelly. He's ahead of Tony Romo, is 39th. He's ahead of Troy Aikman, Hall of Famer. He's ahead of Steve Young, Hall of Famer. He's ahead of Kurt Warner, Hall of Famer.
Can you imagine with what you're just saying, with the right team in the right circumstance, he would have been a Super Bowl champion. He was level of quarterback where he could have led a team to a Super Bowl with the right situation.
Well, you look at when he finally left Seattle, and Seattle was left with a mess when he left.
Oh God!
It got dark after that.
Dan McGuire,
it got really dark,
etc.
But but when he left, look, what did he do? He went to Kansas City and continued to win.
Yeah, he was very Dave or Matt Hasselbeck-esque. Like he was just a very solid quarterback. And
yeah.
Hey, how are you guys doing on time? You guys okay? Another 15 minutes?
Another 15, 20.
I'm okay.
I'm good.
I'm struggling I am struggling to remain upright.
I got a question for you, Dan.
Yeah.
You play guitar, yes?
Haven't touched them in a while, but sure.
Do you ever play in a band?
No.
So this is just kind of a hobby thing.
I used to get together with a buddy of mine who also played guitar and jam and stuff, but yeah, it's like
nice.
No, it's
so. Talk to me about your music, though.
What I used to do is
music.
I would just sit for hours and learn things by ear and teach myself things on the guitar and play along with things. Like that was my
that's me in a nutshell.
And then, I am convinced that there are some skills in this lifetime that if you don't attend, and there are obviously exceptions to every rule, but if you don't get into them or attempt them early enough in the development of your brain, you never have a chance to be great at it. And I think guitar is one of those things, and many musical instruments. I think you have to You have to be introduced to it before you understand how hard it is. And by the time I decided I wanted to learn how to play guitar, I was in college, and I already had that little voice in my head that was like, that's too hard. You can't do what he's doing. You can't, so you just try to learn the basics. And then I would work at it every single day, and I got kind of good at it in some respects, but it's such a mental block that it's just, you have to be able to play free and easy. And the people that make it look easy, it's because when they learned it, they didn't know how hard it was. And I think that applies to a lot of things, but now they're just decorations on the wall. I always vow to myself, I'm going to start playing again, but I just, life is 24 hours is not enough.
Yeah.
So true.
It's not enough.
As a guy with multiple guitars, I will tell you that I agree. I wanted to learn when I was younger and bought a guitar and played until my fingers bled all over it. And then realized I had to stop.
Calluses. Yeah.
I had to stop and let my hands heal. But when I stopped and let my hands heal, I stopped for too long.
Yeah.
And then it became one of those things where I'd pick it up every few years and learn a little bit and then have to put it away.
You used to be able to play really easily. You can't play anymore. You're like, what happened to that?
And so now I've got two guitars and a uke, and I don't consider myself someone who knows how to play. No. But I want to. And
I say the same thing about guitars that I do about golf. I sometimes play guitar, but I'm not a guitar player. And I think there's a delineation to be made. I mean, my one pride and joy, I don't know if you can see it, is I do have a Paul Reed Smith Mark Tremonti signature edition Les Paul version in Starburst Red that Mark actually signed.
Tremonti. Yeah.
So
he was touring with the kid from American Idol.
Oh, Daughtry.
Last year. Daughtry, yeah, he was touring with Daughtry. It was a fun show. Yeah, I play the drums just for fun. I've got a Roland TD50.
You were telling me that. So now
it's a nice pro kit, but I picked it up when I was 54.
Mm-hmm.
And you hadn't played drums before?
No, just the spoons. Okay. Yeah, so, wooden spoons and pans. Yeah, and my cousin though is a pro drummer, and so I've got there's some genes things going on there, so I can keep a basic beat. So I have that as a foundation, and then all the rest is complete crap because I haven't ever learned how to do even paradiddles or fills or anything else, and so I can play along with. In fact, my favorite genre to play along with is smooth jazz because they have a really nice, just solid backbeat on the back end that isn't so fill oriented and so forth. So I don't have to worry about like being a complete rock out drummer. I can just kind of fill that beat and it's kind of fun to play with. But other than that, it's complete just fun. Yeah.
I do have a drum story. And so when I was young, from 5th grade until 10th grade, I played drums and I was always first chair. I was very good at it. But the problem when you were in elementary school and then junior high school band is it was kind of the Peter principle. Like because I was first chair, they always gave me the most challenging assignments. And so I would be assigned to play timpani or, first snare because that was the value, right? So the 3rd and 4th chair dudes were learning how to play a drum set. And so because they were never called upon to get the key roles in any symphony we were composing or any show we were getting ready for. And so I never learned to coordinate my feet and my playing ability. So in high school, I went to the very first day of marching band practice. They handed me a set of tritoms and it just didn't excite me and I walked away from it. But to this day, like my brain is, and when you mentioned the Roland thing before we started recording, like I've told my partner, like someday when we're not living in an apartment, we have a garage or something or a downstairs, like I'm getting a drum set because I still to this day, not a day goes by, I'm not tapping on something. Like that's my brain and how it's wired. Like
next time you're in Phoenix, let me know. I'll let you come over.
Oh, it'd be fun. Yeah.
So
we can jam together.
Is a percussionist in, he's middle school. So he's middle school band and he's a percussionist. And I'm just like, you tell me, you give me the word and I will buy you the drum set. any day. Just
you can get them
straight
on
up.
Amazon
You
for
give me the word.
$250
You
now.
give me the word,
Yeah.
and it will be in your bedroom. And he keeps telling me no, and I don't get it. And to the point where I'm like, you decide you want to do that, and I will take up the bass. Like I've got my guitars, whatever, but I will learn. I will pay someone to teach me how to play the bass to his drum set.
Yeah.
So
that's
that we
fun.
can jam together and, find some guitar. I got a couple of friends that are like, they know how to play way better than I do on the guitar. And I'm like, we'll get Tyler over here and Caleb can play the bass and he'll play the drums and I'll play the bass and Tyler play and we'll jam. And I'm like,
that's just fun stuff.
You give me, just tell me when you're ready and we'll do it. And he keeps telling me no. I'm like, what the fuck's wrong with you, kid?
Sometimes you just got to make it show up.
At a certain
you
level,
just got to get it to show up.
Yeah, you have to want to, or it's not going to happen. But I also think people's brains are wired differently. Like I think my brain was wired more as a drummer. Like to this day, when I go to shows, it's kind of what draws my eye, and I look for the drummer. So
I get a question for you. So based on that, I probably already know the answer. But are you more of a production and quality producers sort of mindset, or are you more of a lyrics guy?
Oh, I'm production and melody. Like
so when you go to a show, you don't even hear the lyrics. You're in it to like hear the
lyrics are secondary, dude.
I've taken so much shit from this about this from people that I've been with in my life in relationships, where like I will literally love a song for a decade and not know what it means lyrically. And then someone points it out to me and I'm like, oh, that's kind of weird. Like it's about melody and hook to me. And does it draw me in and catch me? And I've also been caught doing this at times where I'm like, hey, this song reminds me of you. Send it off because of the chorus. And then you find out that the verses are like completely wrong and a totally different message. And they're like, wait a minute, what? So no, I'm all about hooks and the song has
my musical background will tell you that I like, for me it's about everything but the lyrics. The lyrics are secondary.
They're a bonus.
Everything else.
The lyrics
they are a bonus. They can be great, but you can have shitty ass lyrics, but have something that's legitimately
some of the most memorable songs of all time.
I will say this though, and you guys know this, when you're growing up, like you remember lyrics from the songs from the 70s and 80s, the stuff that you kind of grew up on, but you can't remember lyrics if it was to save your life right now. Like it's just kind of a weird thing. Okay. So I know these are kind of cliche slightly, but I'm really curious because I want to get to know you guys better, because that's what this show is all about. Right? That right?
Yeah.
What's your favorite?
Get to know us better.
Give me your top 5 movies of all time, both of you guys.
Oh fuck!
Just off the cuff. Just give me one and then maybe trade back and forth, just so you guys don't have to try to figure it all out.
The first movie that came to mind when you said that was The Princess Bride. It's fun. It's quotable.
That's a funny movie.
Top 5. Yeah,
but I just saw I saw a live puppet show. I kid you not.
What?
I saw a live puppet show like 2 months ago of The Princess Bride, and it was adult only.
My name is Inigo.
It was adult only, adult puppet show. And we had drinks prior, and dude, I never laughed my ass off so much in my life.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one I might have forgotten about, but it's got to be in my top 5. It's hard for me not to think of sports movies first.
God, but the sports movies are usually so bad.
Oh, but I'm such a huge, for many, many years, and it would still probably be in my top 5 overall movies of all time. For many years, my favorite sports movie is Bull Durham. I just think it's
Bull Durham is
cinematic brilliance. It's a love story and a sports story. Some of the greatest dialogue and casting ever, despite the fact that it looks like Nuke Lelouch actually throws 50 miles an hour and not 100. But Moneyball has overtaken it, and that's just to me, Moneyball is one of those movies where it has some of the most realistic dialogue in any movie I've ever seen, where it actually feels like you're sitting in as a fly on the wall and watching people actually talk, where every sentence isn't perfectly constructed and playing off of each other, that it's sometimes there's awkwardness and silences and you're talking over each other and trying to figure things. Love that movie.
So two movies that I have to admit I've never seen: Moneyball and
Really?
and the Draft movie. What's
That's a guilty pleasure. I watch it every year. There's so many things that are bad about that movie.
I've never seen it. I've never seen it.
It's also kind of awesome in a lot of ways. Like,
my
I'm a Kevin
two
Costner
favorite
fan,
movies.
so he can do no wrong in my eyes. But
my two favorite movies are comedies, and I'm not a huge comedy movie guy because I always find them so disappointing, mostly. But two movies that end up rising to the top of my list all the time are Airplane and Spinal Tap.
I wondered if you were
I
going
don't
to
know.
say
There's
Airplane.
something about those
I was thinking
those things just they get me. Like those movies get me. My sense of humor.
I do love that kind of humor. I think what's brilliant about Airplane is just the writing, just the way you can write a line.
And it just rolls.
It's different than you're expecting
easy.
it to be. Yeah. Keith?
Movies that jump in, you talk about comedies, like Good Morning Vietnam just jumps out as like, God, it's freaking funny up front, but then it's so poignant and so meaningful on the back end. Like that movie just jumps out to me as one of my favorite and just one of the most tremendous movies. And then the other one that comes to mind is actually animated. It's called Princess Mononoke by Miyazaki. And like that's just another one of those that just jumps out. It's like, it's classic. It's absolutely classic. And I think anyone that hasn't seen it should. You'll enjoy it. And
I'll say this, when you say comedy, the first thing that popped in my mind was Anchorman, and that's just one of my all-time favorite classics, and just such great characters. Like the characters they created
Ron
for
Burgundy,
that movie
dude. That's
was unbelievable.
That's
and it was kind of from the golden age of comedies. There was about a 5 or 6 year run
where you
there.
can get away with shit that you couldn't get away with
and there
anymore.
was so much volume. You could go to the theater every couple of months and see a great comedy.
Godfather. I mean, Pulp Fiction.
yeah,
Godfather,
Pulp Fiction, those ones belong in
Heat.
But I
there.
will say this, something else
Heat.
occurred to me, and I think I've named 4, so this would be my 5th, as I have to stay true to this. I remember going to see a movie a couple of years ago because I was thinking, like, has anything come out recently? A couple of years ago, I went to see a movie, and I thought I was blown away by it. And went 2 weeks later, I went back and saw it again. Was still blown away by it. And I remember thinking at that time as I was watching that movie, this is one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. Visually, the writing, the story, everything else it gives me goosebumps thinking about it. And that was Top Gun Maverick. When that movie came out, I thought it topped anything in the action genre that had come out in the last 20 years.
Wow.
And when you couple it with the expectations and how unrealistic some of them were, that they could ever come close to topping one of the most iconic movies, in the last 40 years. And they did the way that they did. Like I have to put that one on the list too. I have to stay true.
How about TV series?
Ooh, that's a fun one.
Ooh, that's a fun one because of there's so many different layers there.
Yeah.
What's your favorite genre?
I can't even. I mean, a great comedy, but those are so hard to find.
Sitcom.
Or stand up?
I will tell you the best series with the worst ending was How I Met Your Mother. Like that was.
You didn't like him walking out of the empty apartment like that? I thought
like that was a tremendous series, and then the last couple episodes were absolute trash that just ruined 4 years or 5 years of character development. Like it was just
I like
Lost
Lost for the same reason. Lost was great at building characters, but there were so many questions, and the ending was kind of screwed up.
Yeah.
I'll say this: endings are so tough. It's almost impossible
really
to write a perfect ending for a TV series.
Did you watch Succession?
And not many TV series get the privilege of being able to write a series finale. A lot of them are canceled like after the fact, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Like Seinfeld's a perfect example. To me, that's a top 5 all-time show. Like I was a huge Seinfeld fan. I know it's not for everybody, but like there's still even those guys, even Larry David and Jerry still kind of argue and joke about how bad the ending was to this day. I don't care. It didn't tarnish the show. for me.
Right. Well, when you do one-off episodes that don't relate to the other one, I mean, they do, but
Yeah.
Mhm.
You mentioned Lost to me. That's in my top 5. Absolutely love that series. And I wasn't as upset about the ending as some people because it
Me
was
neither-
a
me neither.
mythical show anyway.
Yes,
Like what
right.
was
It was
the perfect
for me. It was
ending?
the perfect ending, but
Yeah.
you really had to dig deep to understand what it was all about. And
since
for
then
me,
I've
I liked it
read
so much. Yeah.
Yeah. I've read analysis of it since then where I was like, oh, I didn't look at it that way, But some of the other series that popped to mind just for how great the character casting was and the acting and the writing, Justified with Timothy Olyphant, who's one of my favorite actors
Not
of all
heard of
time,
that.
was
Nope.
unbelievable. And then the Friday Night Lights series,
Mhm.
I thought was so well shot and produced and cast and
Yeah.
realistic, and it just it was cinematic art.
I think you should also
Breaking
need to-
Bad was like that for me.
Breaking Bad, which I have a love-hate relationship with Breaking Bad. Yes, it's great. I'm also a chemistry teacher in my day job, and in that sense, I fucking
Right.
hate that show.
Yeah. I have a love-hate relationship with it too, because I've seen it and I want to see it again, but my significant other will not watch that show. So I have forevermore, I'm kind of regulated too. Yeah.
Has she seen Better Call Saul?
She has not.
Because that
She's anti-violence in watching shows because it triggers like things in her brain and she has a hard time sleeping ultimately.
What are you guys watching right now? Like, are either of you watching anything kind of regularly, or like your go-to when you're just like, I want to burn a couple hours, I don't want to commit to a movie, I'm just going to put this show on right now?
No, I actually right at this moment I don't have a show.
I have just been watching.
Freeing that must
I am rewatching
show.
Futurama.
That's funny.
Okay.
From years ago, which
I've been watching a show called Feeding Phil on Netflix, and it follows Phil, which is a guy that used to be the head writer of Everybody Loves Raymond. And this guy is kind of a quirky personality, and he travels around all over the world, different city every show, and he immerses into the culture, and he talks about different things to eat, different places to eat, different foods, different the eating, the quality of the food, the visual, the entertaining cultural aspect of it, where he kind of talks to people that are in a different language, and he has a translator, and he's just really into it. It's a fantastic show. I would highly recommend it.
So are you watching The Bear?
No.
So I just started, season 3 just came out. I just watched episode 1, realized it's going to take some emotional investment. I'm going to have to be in a certain mood. The Bear is high quality TV. And as someone that's been in the hospitality business for 30 years, the restaurant business, I can say it's the most, surprisingly, I'm surprised there isn't more in this genre that's well done.
So the title doesn't tell the story. What's the deal?
It's about a chef who was classically trained, but he grew up in Chicago, and his brother had a tiny little sandwich shop, and his brother died unexpectedly, and he came back to help save the shop. And so he's trying to like apply everything he's learned, like in France, like as a Michelin star chef, to this little shop. And it is the most realistic, to the point that it triggers my like a PTSD response sometimes, realistic depiction of the hospitality and restaurant business that I've ever seen in cinema, on TV or movies. It's fantastic.
Where is it streaming?
Right, it's on Hulu. Somebody, Seahawkers mentioned Ted Lasso. I probably would have put that in my top 5.
I like Ted Lasso.
Just feel good, great characters.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm watching
out of whatever you were suffering from that day.
Oh, it's perfect timing. Right?
Yep.
It was the perfect timing for that show to be out there. Right now I'm watching, and I watched it a little bit when it was on, but now I'm like almost done with all 8 seasons, is Brooklyn Nine-Nine, which like might be the last really, really well written, spot on comedy series.
Yep.
That
Andy Samberg. It's one of those things where Andy Samberg is one of the true creative minds of the entertainment industry in the last 20 years, and you go
He's
look
great. Yeah.
at the Lonely Island songs that they did that are all on YouTube now, and I've been trying to slowly introduce my students, because I teach high school, to some of them, which they're wildly inappropriate for for that context.
Yeah, you're not going to start them off with "Dick in a Box."
No, I was thinking more along the lines
That's
of
fantastic.
threw it on the ground and I'm on a boat, but but they're still wildly inappropriate, but they're goddamn like just the creativity and just the unique perspective on things and just the ability to just write something that no one else would. For Andy Samberg, and that's what comes through in Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
So
okay, so I've left the best for last. I'm gonna allow Kristen to take us out of this thing with some rapid fire stuff.
Okay,
she's got some questions she needs answered, and we're gonna try to do
rapid
that,
fire
to our
Let's
best.
Do it.
All right, here we go. We kind of hit on this before, but here's our first question: what's your favorite movie? Come on, rapid fire. Let's go.
Moneyball.
Keith.
Princess Bride.
This is Spinal Tap. Okay. What are your hobbies outside of football? Dan.
Oh God. Does podcasting count?
Yes.
Yes. That's it, right?
Yeah. That
That's
would be
kind of what we have in common together.
Legitimate side gig now that takes up most of my but I also like to work out and cook.
Ooh, I like the cooking part.
I turn pens and other things on my lathe. I brew beer, and I have recently stared writing a book.
Your lathe.
Yeah.
Nice.
I made
you also blow up shit, Keith.
When I was in high school.
Come on, wait, hold on. Let's talk about Keith that blows up shit.
That's not a hobby. That's my job.
Keith blows up shit for his job. Okay, let's talk about that. Wait, I want to see the reader, the viewer count go up as he talks.
That's not a hobby. Okay. He gets paid for that.
Yeah, I get paid for that. It's not a hobby. That's part of my job.
Okay, Unabomber. Let's go. What do you got?
No, so I teach chemistry, and my job is to make chemistry interesting, which chemistry sucks. And so therefore, anyone that has memories of chemistry being absolutely boring, you're not alone. So I blow up things like pure sodium and put it in water and watch it blow up. I make colored fire. I make
You're not
fireballs.
supposed to give out the formula, dude. You're just supposed to make it happen.
I make random things happen, like I make purple fire with potassium permanganate and glycerol.
You haven't showed me that video yet.
Yeah, they're all on YouTube. I will. We have a whole day, which is Pyromaniac Day, where we do all sorts of stuff, like making gummy bears scream, which is fun, in a whole bunch of pink fire. And
I love how excited you are. I wish you were excited like this about Seahawks football.
The enthusiasm is Seahawks football. Palpable.
But this is my job. My job is to figure out ways to take really boring shit and make it interesting to kids. And I take it seriously.
Kind of what I do on the podcast.
I love that.
Yeah. So.
Okay, next question. Beatles or Rolling Stones?
Oh,
the Beatles, with the exception of one song. And that would be Paint It Black by the Stones. Like, there's something about that song that is just so fucking good.
I'm going to call myself out on this. I would have probably up until 5 or 6 years ago would have answered Rolling Stones. And I had long maintained that the Beatles are one of the most overrated, great bands of all time. I thought their music was kind of basic and simplistic, and I have since watched a bunch of stuff, a bunch of documentaries, and really come to understand how ahead of the curve they were, and their genius in songwriting, and the process, and how they worked together as very, very different individuals with very different musical ideas, but they were able to combine it and come up with the stuff that they came up with. They are, I have now come to recognize them as the legends that they are. So I would say I love them both. Got to see you mentioned Vancouver or BC place. I got to see the Rolling Stones on their Steel Wheels tour. So maybe they're prime, right?
Nice.
Like that
Mhm.
tour
Yeah.
at
Nice.
BC place and fantastic. And they're still going strong. It's amazing at their age, but I'd have to say Beatles.
Yeah, for me, it's the Beatles because it's the foundation. Like everything
Mhm.
else is off of that. Like if you go and you're talking to like, pick a musician, you ask them about influences and so forth. And even if it transcends generations or genres, and a lot of folks will point back to this. And, you can say the Rolling Stones, but let's be honest, there's really 10 or 15 top songs that everyone knows, right? But the
Mhm.
Beatles, the foundation there is so deep. It's like 40 songs, 50 songs deep. And it at the time, and you have to take it in the context. It's like football stats and football stuff. In the time that it was existing, it transcended the industry in that it created sounds and lyrics and everything that just really was the foundation for everything that followed.
And I'll make a quick
it's
analogy
hard.
because I know this is supposed to be rapid fire, but like we talked about how Journey is historically my favorite band, and I think Journey gets unfairly pigeonholed by some people as a commercial pop band because they only think of the 4 or 5 top 10
Mhm.
hits that come to mind first,
That's
which are
true.
kind of sappy ballads. But you dive deeper into their catalog, and there's some blues and rock and some stuff that's really heavy. And I think the same can be said of the Beatles. When you think of the first 5 or 6
Yeah.
Beatles songs that come to mind, they might be, I want to hold your hand, right? And they're simplistic. But some of the other stuff, like Come Together, like they rocked. There were times that they really got raw and didn't need everything to sound really slick and overproduced. And I think that has over time kind of become what's defined them for me and allowed me to respect them to the point that I do.
Beach or mountains?
Oh, fuck.
The
That's a
older I
really
get,
hard
it
question.
used to be mountains, beach. It's beach. That I'm an old man and I want to be on a beach and
I'm
I
with
want
you,
it to be
Dan. I'm a
76
beach guy.
degrees and breezy and sand, and I want to be looking out
Water.
over the
I
ocean.
like water.
Yep.
I'm a water guy.
I love the beach. Absolutely love the beach. And every year I make a point of getting to the ocean. And
There's
taking my
something
family.
just
Every single year I
awe-inspiring
have
about
to
it.
do it.
Yeah.
But my favorite memories are of the mountains. And I summited Mount Olympus back when it was summitable. Now it's not because so much of the ice and snow have melted. You can't get up it anymore. And I did Mount Adams and Glacier Peak and Mount Baker and everything else in the Pacific Northwest. And those as a I don't want to say a kid because I was like 14, 18, somewhere in that range. Those are my favorite memories in that age range and some of my favorite memories growing up. But every year I have to get to see the ocean. I have to get to the
Wow.
beach.
And that's,
It's
to me, that's the
particularly
difference.
important living in Phoenix too.
Yeah.
You gotta get out there.
If you want to
Yeah.
go, that's what separates them for me too. Is like climbing mountains is a different thing. But like if I want to go, I live in the shadow of Mount Rainier. If I want to go to
Mhm.
Mount Rainier because it's so beautiful, and to this day, as long as I've been living in this area, born and raised here, if it's sunny and I see that mountain on my way to work, it stops me in my tracks. It never ever ceases to amaze me. But if I want to go
Yeah.
to that mountain, guess what happens? When I get there, I can't see it.
Yeah.
Get there and I'm in the woods and I can't see the mountain. Whereas the ocean, I go to the and it's right there, and it's just so awesome.
Mhm.
It's
And,
easy to be when you're in it. It's easy to be in it. It's easy to be part of
Yeah.
the story
the
when you're in the
sound,
ocean.
it's just so calming.
Until you're at the top.
Mm.
God, honestly, guys, having summited almost every mountain in the Pacific Northwest, there is something about being up there and looking around, and there's nothing.
It's just too much work right now.
There's nothing
Just can't
above
do it.
you. It's all below you.
So
It
I
is
live in the tallest.
phenomenal.
I live right next to the tallest peak in Phoenix, which is Piestewa Peak. Used to be Squaw Peak. We
Yeah.
now call it
It's
Piestewa
Phoenix.
Peak.
Peak is in quotation marks. By the
And
way.
yeah, it's
They
like
call things
Yeah.
mountains there that
It's
are
like
like
850
molehills here.
feet or whatever, right? But it's when you start at zero, you're
Mhm.
850 feet and about a half a mile is a pretty decent elevation
Right.
hike, at least for a guy like me. Okay. Who is your favorite Seahawk of all time? Doesn't even have to be a player, just who around the organization.
Oh, favorite. Okay, so it's Jim Zorn for me. And I almost said Matt Hasselbeck, but like growing up, like Jim Zorn was the guy that made me love football. His personality, the way he played the game. I got to meet him a number of times. Like that has to be, that's my answer. Jim Zorn.
Bill, answer the question on my behalf. Who's my favorite Seahawk of all time?
Cortez Kennedy. And why? Because he was a difference maker in the middle of a defense, and you love defense.
Yeah.
In the middle of a defense,
he was
in the defensive line.
transformational.
Was it because he never had to
Transformational.
worry about
And
what
he
he
had
ate?
and he played on shitty teams, which made it all the more spectacular
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
him as an individual player.
Yep.
And he never mailed it in ever.
Yeah. He never mailed. God, the guy was on some of the worst teams in NFL history. Was the defensive player of the year on a team that went 2-14.
Won 2 games. Yep.
Okay, so
crazy.
for me,
That'll never happen again, by the way.
It will never happen again.
Ever. Yeah.
So in fear of being called who knows what, and
You're gonna
sappy
say
or
Geno
whatever.
Smith?
No, I like our old quarterback,
Russ.
Yeah.
Russ. I do.
Oh, Russ. Yeah.
For me, he was the first player in a long time when he came on that made me giddy.
He was
just
so much fun.
Giddy of
He was
like
fun.
laughing of laughing at football again, of being joyful, of being just happy, of going out and winning games on his own. Like we'd never had a player like that could just literally take a team on his shoulders and go out and win games and put us in a position to be successful. And we were successful. He gets dissed on a lot, and I get it. He's got a lot going on.
I think over
his
time,
outside of football relationships and all that stuff. But you know what? For 10 years, man, he was the dude, and he did that really well.
I suspect that over time that the blowback is going to fade. Like his personality was off-putting, especially near the end. I was over it. I was tired of it.
Sure, I get that.
You know, and the game kind of passed him by those last couple of years too. Like it just didn't.
And so did his
doing
legs
anymore. But he was such a spectacular player, and we talked about how Richard Sherman kind of changed the position. Like Russell Wilson kind of opened the floodgates a little bit. Like would Bryce Young have ever been the number 1 pick in the draft? Would Kyler Murray have ever been the number 1 pick in the draft?
No.
If
honestly
Russell Wilson
no.
hadn't come
The answer is no.
first. Yeah.
Russ opened the door for the shorter quarterback, especially the shorter athletic quarterback.
And when we think about that sort of, which was a very brief period where the read option thing was such a weapon in the NFL, like he was the dude. He was the guy at the forefront of that.
Yeah.
That they made that work, and it made it so difficult on defenses. And some of the throws.
He was like Dante Culpepper on steroids.
I'll never forget some of his throws. The throw against the Houston Texans where he did the 360. Remember that, where he's scrambling out to the right side and he turned around. Yep. The throw in the action green on Sunday night football against the Rams.
Year where he won against New England Patriots.
Yep.
You know, and nobody expected them to win that game, and he came in and won that game. The defense, really disrupted that game, and that was
that the You Mad Bro game?
Yeah, You Mad Bro.
Yep. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Well, and the first memory I have really of Russell Wilson where I thought, oh, this guy's going to be great was, there were actually moments in his first start against Arizona where they went down to the end. He threw a couple balls to Baldwin and he just couldn't get it. He couldn't make it happen.
Couldn't finish, right.
But that Chicago game, his rookie year at Chicago,
that
where he had to
overtime
lead
game.
2 game-winning
Yeah.
drives. He had to lead the
Yeah.
drive down at the end of regulation to tie it, send it to overtime, then another drive
Yep.
all the way down. He did it with
Yep.
running and throwing. I was like, wow, this is not just a fluke. This is something
Mhm.
special here. And it's unfortunate
Yes.
because I
yes.
do think he could have handled things differently and in a way that maybe he would still be here, but he
Yeah.
just wasn't. That's just not where his head was, and it's not where his focus was.
He
and
was
it
so
just
worried
wasn't.
about legacy, and he
Mhm.
wasn't
Well-
worried about playing the game in front of him.
No.
And then him going to Denver and demanding his own corner office, and
With
his
his own
teammates
coaches.
could only contact
Jake Heaps.
him
I love Jake, but
through
yeah.
through his agent or his publicist, I guess, and just the ego and the way that he ran that in
Mm.
Denver really just screwed up his
That was rock
legacy.
bottom for him. I will say this. I think
felt
he
bad
might have
for
a
him.
really good year this year. Like
I do
I
agree.
think he's in the perfect place that plays the perfect style, that has a defense to support him and an offensive line that, and all the weapons.
And
like,
a team that doesn't give a shit. They
Right.
paid him 1.5 or
And I
whatever.
also feel like
Yeah.
there's some signs that maybe he understands now he's not going to get to throw it 40 times. And that's not his game, because now I've seen the videos. I know you guys
Najee
have too.
Harris is going to be a great back.
He looks
for him.
like he's in the best shape he's ever been in. Like,
Yeah.
I think it was kind of genius for the Steelers to go out and get Justin Fields, just to kind of be like, hey,
Right, we got a guy.
it's not,
Suck
we're
it
just
up,
not
dude.
handing it to you.
If you pull that shit that you did in Denver, trying
Yeah.
to pull it here, we got another guy. We'll move on.
Manage the game, have that dominant
job.
running game, and hit a couple of big plays. Like, he could have a really, really good year. That team could win. Like the
And
Steelers.
the fact that they're only paying him $1.5 million, and they're never going to have to pay him more, because he's never going to come out and be like, "Hey, I demand to be, one of the top paid
they'll
guys."
never have that market
Because
again.
forget not having that market. He's getting paid that money from Denver,
Yeah.
and if he asks Pittsburgh to pay him that, it's all in offsets.
Yeah.
So Pittsburgh has to pay him instead of Denver. Denver
Mhm.
then has less money to pay him, and they get to get better, and Pittsburgh gets worse. So it doesn't affect him. It doesn't help him financially for him to make those demands.
And being
So
in
he's-
Pittsburgh, on the East Coast, in Pittsburgh, and he's not even on the coast, I think is a perfect spot for him to kind of just try to redefine himself a little bit.
Mhm.
If
Yeah.
he takes it, if he takes the opportunity, because he's tarnished right now. I don't even know if he makes the Hall of Fame. Because
Well, and
and
that's-
it's not just a Seahawks fandom thing that's turned against him. It's the entire league. Now, granted, everyone doesn't like Sean Payton just as much, because a lot of people feel like he was mistreated there. Maybe so, maybe not. I don't know. But it's time for him to turn it around, and it's in his hands. And
Yeah.
it's a good
I'll
opportunity
say-
for him.
If Denver does well with Bo Nix,
Mm.
Russ doesn't sniff the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. It's an interesting standpoint. But what if Russ goes out and throws for 4,000 yards, 30 touchdowns,
I
10
think
picks,
it's on Russ. Yes, of
and
course.
they make it to
I
the
don't know.
AFC Championship game, and
The fact-
he
I think
has
that's
a
more
good
telling.
year.
Keith, that's more telling. That would be more telling on Sean Payton to me.
I think that
Then-
the fact that Seahawks got better when Russ left, and Geno Smith, who is viewed as a mediocre player, was better than Russ, and Pete Carroll. There was the whole view of is it Russ or Pete, and why would you pick the old coach over the young quarterback?
Mhm.
But then, Pete and freaking Geno were better, and then, if Sean Payton and Bo Nix, who's viewed as like, God, that was an overdraft. They should never, second, third round court talent, whatever. If that's better than Russ, God, that's going to hurt Russ's legacy so hard.
I'm proud of us for not diving into the Geno Smith debate, because we might be, that would have probably added another hour.
I had a Geno question and I left it, and I think I
Yeah.
will. All right, you guys, it's been amazing. I think we're going to wrap this thing.
Yeah,
it's crazy. This thing
3
is
hours isn't
approaching-
our longest show together, but you know,
it's not.
It's pretty good territory.
I was going to say it's getting close to that July of whatever year
Right.
show that we had together.
Yeah.
And in downtown Seattle for that live show. That was amazing.
Oh, at Ozzy's, that was awesome. Too bad the
Ozzy's.
audio was off. That was such
It's all my fault. Yeah.
That was in the moment before we learned that the audio was off. That was such a good show. That was such a fun
That was a good
show.
time.
And getting Corbin in there was helpful too. So.
Yeah,
absolutely.
that was great. Yeah. You guys, thank you. I mean, for our 8th annual, this was amazing. Keith and I have been at this a long time. Dan, you've been at this a long time. It's good to get us all together in the same room. We've been all friends together within this community for quite a while, and definitely friends of each other's shows over the years. So thank you again. You can follow Dan on Seahawks Forever on Twitter. He's got his own podcast, as you guys know, Seahawks Forever Podcast, on every favorite podcast platform that you can imagine, in his own YouTube channel. Become very successful, I would say, over the last 18 months or so. Yes, Dan?
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Sirs. Thank
Killing
you. Yeah.
it.
Continues
Yeah.
to grow. I have a really cool viewer base and have some cool things to announce over the next couple of months of some growth of the channel, and some opportunities have come our way. So just continue at it. And it's you guys, I'm sure, would agree with this 100%. It's the engagement of the viewers and the listeners that make it even more fun. Like when I started podcasting, I just had stuff to say and I didn't know if anyone would ever listened to it. I just wanted to get it out. But as it started to find traction and kind of garner the right audience, like that's what keeps me going, is the engagement in the comments and the debate and the conversation. I love that stuff. And it's always fun to come on with you guys. And I think we have something coming up later in the month too, with Bryce and Ryan and those guys from Hawk Zone. I think they've reached out to you about a big roundtable. So
we're going to have
we'll
a roundtable
always do the
discussion,
crossover
right?
stuff. I always love lifting up other great content creators.
too.
There's a lot of them in the Seahawks space.
Yep.
And so it's a lot of fun.
I will say this. I learned this writing is, it's about, it starts out with you have something to say, but it really comes down to the people who read it or listen to it or whatever. They're what matters. They're what makes the writing or the podcasting meaningful, because without someone to read or listen, it doesn't matter what you have to say.
Yeah.
And
yes, absolutely. Yeah. So thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for Dan's listeners for coming along. And thank you to our listeners as well. It's been a great time to get together, ask all the fun questions. Really enjoyed the show. We've got currently right now, we've got 258 current watchers of the live stream. So that's a great number, great, amazing to have all you guys with us. And fun show, 1st of July. We're only now inside 3 weeks from training camp, when rookies start showing up. We can start talking about real football again, what's actually going on with the team. Excited for this season. Lots of changes, a new era, really, of Seahawks football. And we're all here to kind of cover it for you, and super excited for that. So you can find Dan again at Seahawks Forever. You can find Keith at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. You know where the show's at. Subscribe to both channels. It's great. You don't miss a show that way. And we'll see you next time.
Thanks, guys.
So
This
go
is
Hawks.
fun.
Go Hawks.